Welcome to today's full council meeting, which is being held in the council chamber of Portsmouth Guildhall. I would firstly like to welcome the Very Reverend Canon Dr. Anthony Kane, Dean of Portsmouth, who will say prayers. Dr. Kane.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, following the Commonwealth Day flag raising in Guildhall Square yesterday, a prayer based on the affirmations in the Commonwealth Charter. Let us pray. God of life and peace, help us to affirm in our words and actions that every person possesses unique worth and dignity. Help us to affirm our desire for peace among all peoples and nations, and our belief in justice for everyone everywhere. Help us to affirm our respect for the natural world, our work together for a sustainable future, our support for all young people. And help us to cooperate within this great city with mutual respect and goodwill to deliver our common goals for the common good. In this council meeting and in all we do and say, may heaven's light be our guide. Amen.
Please be seated, members. Thank you very much, Dean. You are most welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I understand that you have another meeting at 2:30, so we will understand if you leave. Councillor Vernon Jackson, you...
We are, of course, happy to welcome Dr. Kane back after his 2:30 meeting if he'd like to join us for the rest of our council meeting.
Right. Well, since you have mentioned various pieces of him coming back, may I bring to members' attention the service in the Anglican Cathedral on the 7th of May, the day following the coronation, which will be attended by the Lord Mayor, the Lord Lieutenant, the Bishop of Anglican Bishop of Portsmouth, and as many councillors as are able to attend. 7th of May at 11 a.m. in the Anglican Cathedral in Old Portsmouth. Right, having got that one to your attention, may I draw your attention to the COVID and other winter viruses advice provided. The Director of Public Health would like to remind us that the Chief Medical Officer advises people to continue to follow the regular hand washing, face coverings, keep space of 2 meters, and room ventilation guidance when meeting people inside, as we remain in the winter period, despite the weather outside. This will reduce the spread of coughs, colds, and other viruses, including COVID-19, which is still circulating in the city. It has been a difficult winter for the NHS and for our own care services. So in order to reduce the risk of catching and passing winter viruses, members are advised to follow these preventative measures while moving around the Guildhall. The filming of council proceedings. For the attention of those members of the public wishing to record proceedings, the Council's rules prohibit the filming, photographing, or recording of members of the public, including those making deputations. Evacuation procedures. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble in front of the Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. Microphone system. To remind members wishing to speak, you simply press the talk button on the unit in front of you, and I will activate the microphone when I call you to speak. I will also turn off your microphone once you have finished speaking. Now moving to item agenda 1 on this council meeting, declarations of interests. Members, if you have any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal or prejudicial interests to declare in relation to the items on the agenda before us, can you please indicate? Councillor Jeffrey.
Yep, for 18D, I've got a personal, non-prejudicial interest, so I'm going to exclude myself from the chamber. Yeah, D.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Under 18F, the young carers, my eldest daughter has been on a few young carers' days out and stuff, so I declare a personal interest on that following discussion with the city solicitor.
Agenda item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. It is proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor Bosher that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of February 2023, which have previously been circulated, be confirmed as a correct record. Are the minutes agreed? Item 3, communications. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Dave Ashmore, Councillor Chris Atwell, Councillor Lee Hunt, and Councillor Gemma New. Apologies for lateness have been received from Councillor Brian Brent and Councillor Terry Norton. In addition, the Chief Executive sends his apologies due to being called for jury service. As members have previously been notified by email, the Lady Mayoress and I will be supporting St Mary's Church Fratton, their annual Easter project, and I am asking fellow councillors to support this worthy cause by donating Easter eggs, either at today's meeting, or you can come to the Lord Mayor's office to drop them off before the end of the month. Thank you for those of you who have already done so. I very much hope that you will be able to support St Mary's in their Easter message of sharing hope and new life. There we are, Easter egg. And finally, further to the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of March, I am aware that the Leader of the Council wishes to provide an update to the Council on the Household Waste Recycling Centre booking system, item which was considered at that meeting. Leader, will you please present your update?
Lord Mayor, just to say this was requested by members here at full council that we went and asked residents both across the city and specifically in Port Solent about whether they wish to retain the booking system or to get rid of it. The report came to Cabinet, but it just seemed in terms of courtesy which should be report back here because this is where the request came from, and both the wider group of people across the city and people in Port Solent both wish to retain the existing booking system and not go back to a free-for-all. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Leader. We now move to agenda item 4, deputations from the public under Standing Order 24. City Solicitor.
My Lord Mayor, there are 2 deputations for this meeting, details of which are circulated on the green sheet. Can I ask Mr Cummings to make your deputation in support of item 18C, notice of motion, extending safe spaces for people in Portsmouth. You have up to 6 minutes in which to deliver your deputation. The bell will sound when there is 1 minute to go, and again at the end of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's probably only going to be taking a minute. Do I get credit for that? Right.
Certainly, Mr Cummings.
Oh, that's lovely. Now, my name is Les Cummings, and I'd like to agree with Council's proposals in 18C, extending safe places for people in Portsmouth. Now, under full council believes everyone has a right to feel safe in Portsmouth, no matter their background, age, ability, or location in the city. Very important sentence, that. As full council resolves to invite Portsmouth City Council to review its existing schemes to increase public safety and explore if further improvements can be made. I believe there are some improvements needed to ensure everyone feels safe here in Portsmouth. And I'd like to remind Council it has a duty of care. When that fails, as it did in a recent Children's Respite Centre care home, where conditions were so bad that Ofsted issued a suspension order against Portsmouth City Council, forcing its closure. Ofsted cited a child had objects thrown at his head. Another child was denied food, even though the child told them he was hungry. And most egregious of all, these children were all disabled, probably the most vulnerable people in our society. Now, if anyone wants to read this Ofsted report, just go to the Ofsted website and request the report under FOI, as I did, and they will send you the report. I can assure you it's a very unsettling indictment on this now closed home. So when Council makes these resolutions today, let's trust they mean it and fulfil these obligations to the future, in the future. On a personal note, several decades ago, as a child, I was in the care of this council, but my time has come and gone. But how upsetting it has been to discover many of my own traumatic experiences are being experienced by children today. Please, council, please take care of our children. Do you know what it says on the Old Bailey, opened in 1902? Do you know what's inscribed there? Massively big letters. Font 425,000, I expect. It actually says, defend the children of the poor and punish the wrongdoer. They've been there since 1902. Remember those words and protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Can I please now ask you to retire to the seating to the side of the chamber if you wish to watch the proceedings. Can I ask Ms Snaith to make your deputation on behalf of Stop the Sewage Southsea in support of item 18D, Notice of Motion Southern Water. You have up to 6 minutes in which to deliver your deputation. The bell will sound when there is 1 minute to go and at the end of your time. Thank you.
My Lord Mayor, I'm speaking today as a member of Stop the Sewage Southsea, a local group formed in 2021 which now has over 2,300 members who are all committed to ending the pollution of our bathing waters. The sea is central to the history and prosperity of this city, and we believe that the residents of Portsmouth have a basic entitlement to swim, walk, kayak, sail in or otherwise enjoy the beauty of the sea year-round, safely, and without risk of exposure to pathogens, chemicals, and microplastics. We know that the open water swimming community in the city is hundreds strong, and swimming provides exercise, social interaction, and time outside in nature for free, which, during a cost of living crisis, is more important than ever before. Stop the Sewage Southsea have worked hard to build strong relationships with the City Council and local political groups. We're grateful to Stephen Morgan MP for inviting us to his environmental events and to Councillor Steve Pitt for supporting our petition to install warning signs at the seafront, which have been installed temporarily in the form of manual signs updated daily. To be crystal clear, we wish these signs were not necessary. We strive for a future where the sea is always clean and people can swim, paddleboard and sail without needing to check the status of recent discharges. However, that is the future and not today. These temporary signs need to become permanent, digital, live updated signs which are highly visible. Tourists, visitors and those without access to smartphones all deserve to make educated choices about their health and well-being, although we wish they didn't have to. And digital signs are a clear, visible and user-friendly way of doing this. We believe the Council, in a time of austerity and cuts from central government, shouldn't have to bear this cost, and Southern Water should foot the bill. Water quality gradings at Southsea have dropped year on year since 2019. And if the trend continues, we will be at risk of our beautiful beaches being graded as poor. this would have a devastating impact on the tourism our seafront relies on. We are proud at Stop the Sewage to work closely with the Clean Harbours Partnership. Our members have helped collect samples for their Project Spotlight research. We support their call to be led by science, not hyperbole and emotion. We call upon the City Council and those here to pay close attention to the forthcoming findings of their research, including the levels of various chemicals within our seawater and their potential impact on human and marine health. Sewage is only one aspect of the pollution of our seas, and we ask the Council to engage equally with research into highway runoff and agriculture as potential sources of pollution. We are proud to support this motion and ask all councillors to demonstrate their commitment to the well-being of both our seas and the residents of Portsmouth by voting to support it.
Thank you, Ms Nath. Can I ask you now to retire to the public gallery if you wish to watch the remainder of the proceedings? Thank you.
Thank you to the deputies. This brings us to the end of the deputations for this meeting, and we come to agenda item 5, questions from the public under Standing Order 25. No questions from the public have been received under the provisions of this standing order, and so we move to agenda item 6, appointments, and I am not aware of any appointments to be made at this meeting. Agenda item 7, urgent business. I have been notified of one item of urgent business submitted by Councillor Pitt following the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of March. This is in respect of the Civic Offices regeneration item considered at that meeting. As this is an information item, as per Standing Order 26, the Cabinet member may speak for up to 6 minutes, as may the opposition spokespersons. Councillor Pitt, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'll be brief. This is due to procedural reasons, with an apology from the Director that it was an oversight that it should have been added to the agenda today as a noting item. There was a commitment in the original notice of motion to report back to full council, and the details of the report are included, I'm assured by James Harris, in the supplementary matters for today's meeting. It was the cross-party working group has met effectively on this matter. I recently took over chairing that. Discussions remain positive and collegiate, and the group has decided that it will be necessary for it to continue into the next municipal year, and that will be the case, and regular updates will be brought back to these meetings. I don't think there's anything else I need to add.
Thank you. Opposition spokespersons, would you like to speak to this item? Nope. Right. Now moving to agenda item 8, to receive and consider the recommendations of the Governance Audit and Standards Committee held on the 25th of January 2023. Members, as previously circulated within the agenda, are the recommendations of the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee. I will deal with the recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections. Can I also remind everyone that any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Governance and Audit and Standards Committee, Minute 4, Contract Procedure Rules. Nope. Right. Moving on to agenda item 9, to receive and consider the recommendations of the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of March 2023. Members, the recommendations have been published and previously circulated. I will deal with the recommendations in turn by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections, and as before, Any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Cabinet Minute 23, Capital Strategy. Right. The recommendation is approved. Moving on to agenda item 10, Treasury Management Policy. To receive and consider the recommendations of the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of March 2023. Members, the recommendations have previously been circulated and are contained in the green sheets. I will deal with the recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections, and as before, any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Cabinet Minute 24, Treasury Management Policy. Moving on to agenda item 11, Council tax premiums on second homes and empty properties. To receive and consider the recommendation of the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of March 2023. Members, the recommendations have previously been circulated and are contained in the green sheets. I will deal with the recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections, and as before, any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Cabinet Minute 31, Council tax premiums on second homes and empty properties. Moving on to agenda item 12, Anaerobic Digestion Plant Project. Members, this report is for noting only with no recommendations. The matter is now before the Council for debate. No. Moving on to agenda item 13, Forward Plan Emissions. Notice. Enabling development of the former Devonsham Palmerston Road compulsory purchase order. This matter and the subsequent 2 agenda items have been deleted. Right. We now move on to agenda item 16, the appointment of an independent person. To receive and consider the recommendations of the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee meeting held on the 8th of March 2023. Members, the recommendations have been previously circulated and are contained in the green sheets. Whilst it does not impact upon the recommendation, I wish to draw members' attention to an error in the report at paragraph 6.2, where the word met should read meet. The interview panel has not yet met. I will deal with the recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections, and as before, any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Governance and Audit and Standards Committee, Minute 19, Appointment of Independent Person. I hope we can carry on at this rate. However, I have my doubts. Now moving on to agenda item 17, Pay Policy Statement. To receive and consider the recommendations of the Employment Committee meeting held on the 9th of March 2023. Members, the recommendations have been previously circulated and are contained in the green sheets. I will deal with the recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections, and, as before, any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. Employment Committee, Minute 8, Pay Policy Statement. Thank you. Item 18, Notices of Motion. We have 6 notices of motion before us today. As you are aware, all notices of motion on the agenda will automatically be dealt with at this meeting if duly proposed and seconded. Is motion A, Tesco Supermarkets, removal of recycling facilities, proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor George Madwick?
My Lord Mayor, tempting as it is for me to run out of the chamber so we get through this quickly, and by not proposing, I think this is the 3rd time we tried to do this, so I think we have to do it.
Is that then seconded?
Happy to second it, Lord Mayor.
Right, thank you. I now call upon the proposer, Councillor Vernon Jackson, to present and speak to his motion.
My Lord Mayor, very shortly, we all know that Tesco's have removed the recycling facilities. I particularly know the one in my ward at Fratton Way, where Tesco's have got space to be able to do recycling. They had bottle banks and for paper and card. And I think it's very disappointing that they've chosen to remove those. As I understand, it also happened up at Port Solent as well. It seems to me that Tesco's are a very large company. They made £2.8 billion of profits last year, and they should take their responsibility to the environment seriously. They sell lots of things in packaging, and they should be doing their bit to be able to help people recycle. I'm happy to announce that where Tesco's have decided to walk away from their responsibilities, the City Council has decided to help. So a new set of bottle banks will be provided by the City Council just outside of Tesco's in Fratton Way, because the City Council cares about recycling while Tesco's may not. And we're working on trying to do the same up in Port Solent so that we're able to provide that. So, my Lord Mayor, happy to propose this. I think this is a very retrograde step by Tesco's, and I hope we send them a strong message. I have to say, my plans to be able to have a large poster with the bottle bank saying Tesco's might not care about recycling, but the City Council does, I think at the moment are being sat on, which I'm disappointed by, because I think it's a statement which is true and obvious. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Are there any amendments to this motion? No? In which case the matter is now before the Council for debate. I have Councillor Jeffrey. If you would start.
My Lord Mayor, I wanted to speak on this notice of motion because I'm a keen recycler. Before I was elected, I contacted the council leader after coming back from the Tesco Superstore in Fratton. I'd found out that they were about to remove the store cardboard recycling banks. Councillor Vernon Jackson took up this issue and has lobbied Tesco to reverse their decision. Thank you. At this stage, I didn't know that they would also be removing other recycling banks, such as glass. And I understand that they've also withdrawn recycling banks at their Tesco store in Port Solent as well. It's worth reminding ourselves, as Tesco's does on its own website, that the food sector both contributes to climate change and is vulnerable to its effects. In the environmental policy section of Tesco's website, they highlight the 4 R's. They say, a little help makes a big difference. Remove, reduce, reuse, recycle. They go on to say, we're serious about packaging and plastic waste. We're taking action to remove it where we can, reduce it where we can't, reuse more, recycle what's left. Well, not apparently in Portsmouth, my Lord Mayor. In the last financial year, Tesco made £2.8 billion total operating profit, which incidentally is an increase of 36%. As a food business, Tesco's long-term success depends on the health of the natural environment. They say that they aim to minimise their environmental impact and are proud signatories of Courtauld 2025. This is a voluntary agreement that brings together organisations across the food system to make food and drink production and consumption more sustainable. My Lord Mayor, Tesco's motto is, of course, every little helps. I agree. As Britain's largest food retailer and a generator of waste, Tesco can afford to have the recycling bank supporting the community and environment, and they should. Councillors, please vote for this notice of motion, and Tesco, do the decent thing and bring back your recycling banks in Portsmouth.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Gerardo.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I also want to thank Councillor Vernon-Jackson and Councillor Madgwick for bringing this motion to full council. Back in the summer of 2021, Tesco removed their recycling facilities from the Tesco Extra store in Fratton. So Councillor Fielding and I wrote to Tesco about this because council glass recycling bins in central Southsea were overflowing as a result. This put council recycling points under increased pressure and caused excess waste to spill onto the streets. The recycling facilities at Tesco supermarkets are a crucial resource for helping to minimise waste and encourage recycling in our community. The Fratton Tesco supermarket was a popular location for residents from across the city to responsibly dispose of recycling waste, as was Tesco in North Harbour. And Councillor Jeffrey actually stole my limelight because I was literally about to quote the Tesco sustainability policy as well, but I'm happy that Councillor Jeffrey did so on Council's behalf. But indeed, they do state in their own policy that they should take responsibility for reducing the amount of waste and not contributing to it. So it does seem at odds then for the company to be cutting provision at its very busy city stores when their strategy and aims are to do more to tackle waste. So Labour councillors, along with the rest of residents across the city, encourage Tesco to reinstate the recycling provision at Fratton and North Harbour stores as soon as possible. We obviously welcome the information that leaders provided today as well. It would be brilliant to have even more provisions on site. That would be fantastic. So this is to prevent waste being dumped elsewhere and for Tesco to continue to play a part in helping to tackle waste in Portsmouth. We also welcome the improvements to the recycling facilities that are soon to be due in response to the Environment Act. We've long campaigned for the roadside collection of glass and a wider range of plastics and packaging to be recycled. And it is absolutely appalling that Portsmouth has one of the worst recycling rates in the country, with less than 1/4 of waste recycled. So more does need to be done to drastically increase those recycling rates to support our aim of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you very much to Councillor Vernon-Jackson and to Councillor Madgwick for bringing this forward. I know it's the third time that we've tried to do this, but I'm really pleased it is before us today. I think it is, I just wanted to add a couple of things if possible. When I took over this side of the portfolio around almost this time last year, this was a big issue for residents not just in Milton and Central Southsea but Fratton as well, who use these facilities quite significantly. As a council, we did reach out to Tesco's to see if they would like to, if they weren't going to keep the bins there, the banks, sorry, whether they would like to give us the banks so we could redistribute it across the city and around Central Southsea, Fratton, Milton. That didn't come to anything. We offered to buy the banks, see if we could redistribute them around the city. So, like Councillor Gerardo said, you know, the banks wouldn't be overflowing. We had no use with that as well. Apparently they were removed due to fly tipping issues, but we also offered to look into CCTV to help with that as well. But unfortunately, it didn't come forward. So it is really disappointing. I think there is a fact as well that packaging is a huge issue with supermarkets, and we need to be trying to push forward across to make sure that packaging is more sustainable so that it can be recycled much easier. And perhaps, I know that I went into Tesco's during lockdown on one of my shopping trips, and they'd changed the egg cartons from cardboard cartons to plastic, and I did write to them. I'm not saying it's because of me, but I think quite a few people did write to them, and they changed back in Fratton to the cardboard ones. So I don't, you know, why we're doing this. I don't quite know why the supermarket's doing this. But I do think it's vital as well to say when there's a bit of good news. When you look at some of the other supermarkets across the city and across the country, some of them are doing some really good things. So I look at Co-op, their bags, obviously we all have to buy the bags now if we want to use them, but it's fantastic. They are the biodegradable, compostable bags that you can put in your food waste bin. Great, you can recycle them, no waste materials left from that. We've got other places like Sainsbury's who are doing the Tetra banks as well, like we do as a city, so that you can do your shopping, get rid of your cartons there as well. So what we want to do is make sure that this carries on, it continues, and that there are many different options of recycling, not just from us as a council, but the supermarkets who have this packaging are making sure that there is the option to go out when you go shopping and make sure that it's recycled properly. So some supermarkets are doing great things. Others, I think, need to work a little bit harder on it. But I'm really pleased this motion is before us today to talk about it. And, you know, I hope Tesco's enjoy having a bottle bank opposite where the other ones used to be. And it's great that our residents across the city will be able to go and recycle opposite Tesco's. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep this very short. I do support the principle of the motion. I also support the principle that as supermarkets generate a significant quantity of waste, they should make a contribution to the proper disposal and recycling of that waste. I do think, though, I wanted to reiterate a point that was already made by Councillor Gerardo, but emphasise it again, that I do think it surprises people coming to this city, visitors to this city, how much they can't recycle from home. And I do hope the administration can update us on their plan to resolve that issue soon. I think that a greater range of plastic, so much of it is recyclable, needs to be recyclable in this city. I think it's disappointing aluminium foil is not recyclable, as that's a very standard thing in a lot of cities. Like Councillor Gerardo, I think glass collection at roadside or somewhere more local would be a great advantage in this city as well. I do think that there is some element of this council needing to get its house in order on this issue too, to avoid being accused of hypocrisy on this issue. But I do echo the sentiment that this is a retrograde decision by Tesco, which is disappointing. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Since no other members have indicated, I would like to ask Councillor Vernon-Jackson to sum up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I think everybody's in agreement. I think, for which I'm very grateful. I had hoped that Tesco's would reconsider, but not. That hasn't happened. Just to answer Councillor Atkins' point, I'm sure his spokesman on the environment will have told him that because we're part of Project Integra, where we work with all the other councils in Hampshire, we do all this together, and that a new MRF is being built to allow all councils in Hampshire to be able to do curbside recycling, which we've agreed in Portsmouth for glass, for pots, for trays and things like that, so that there'll be a massive increase in the amount of recycling. But we have to do it with other councils. We can't just collect it and then bin it. Because if you're going to recycle stuff, you need to recycle it properly. We were hoping at one point that the MRF would be a Smurf, but they've decided to downgrade it, so it is now just a super MRF, not a Smurf. My understanding planning permission has been granted, and it's being built in Eastleigh, and therefore will come on stream, and that means that all those things that we want to recycle, like glass, will happen door to door. It'll mean that we will all get an extra receptacle at home to be able to put them in, because you can't mix paper and cardboard with glass that breaks. Otherwise, you get lots of little bits of glass in it, and then it means that the paper manufacturers reject the whole lot, at which point it all goes to be burnt, and the whole point of recycling is completely missed. So we will be getting this, and I'm looking forward to it. I think one of the great things about Portsmouth is that we send so little waste to landfill. Only 4% of our waste goes to landfill from Portsmouth, one of the very lowest in the country, and I think that shows the investment that's been made over many years by different administrations in trying to make sure that we treat this seriously. So, Lord Mayor, I hope people will support this, this proposal.
Thank you. A vote will now be taken. Will those members in favour of the motion please show? Will any members to the contrary please show? Will any members who are abstaining please show? The motion is carried. I now turn to motion B, neighbourhood policing matters. As a proposer, Councillor Hunt has tendered his apologies. He has COVID, incidentally. The motion cannot be formally moved. It must therefore be treated as abandoned under Standing Order 33. We now move on to motion C, extending safe places for people in Portsmouth, proposed by Councillor Gerarda and seconded by Councillor Horton. Is that confirmed, Councillor Gerarda?
Yes, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor Horton?
Happy to second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now call upon the proposer, Councillor Gerarda, to present and speak to her motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this motion came about because I attended a coffee morning focused on crime that was organised by our City MP, Stephen Morgan. Lots of issues were raised there, but towards the end of the meeting, Karen Wallace, who is a local parent and chair of the Portsmouth Parent Board, said that a significant number of young people feel unsafe walking to and from school. The reason being, this was a prime time for drug deals and drug gangs to target pupils to join county line operations. Karen also mentioned it was something parents worried about too. Karen's contributions got me thinking about safe space schemes that Citizens UK worked with organisations and councils to implement in various places across the country. Community safe space schemes help to provide havens for young people to go to in case they get into any kind of trouble or simply didn't feel safe. Since that meeting, I've been working with Karen to consider how such a scheme might work for Portsmouth. We invited Jo Morgan, Director of Engendering Change, to support with this, as her work with the Portsmouth Youth Cabinet and the Council of Portsmouth Students found similar issues were being raised there too. Young people shared concerns about where to go if there were issues out in public, what to do if young people experience bullying or violence, and what to do if safety was compromised walking the streets. And it's by pure coincidence that the young people who are part of Motivate South have just invited the public to attend a film screening and Q&A on a chosen topic that's important to them. The film they have chosen to air and discuss is County Lines. So it's reassuring to know that this motion and its aims strikes a chord with so many young people in Portsmouth and the individuals and organisations that are working hard to ensure that every young person in our city thrives. Colleagues may remember that this motion was originally brought to the December full council meeting, but Councillor Horton reached out because there were a number of improvements she felt that could be made. And I would like to thank her for being open and working together on focusing and enhancing this motion, and for collaborating for the benefit of this council and ultimately for the young people of Portsmouth. So over the past few months, we've been working together with council officers to strengthen the motion and ensure its aims align with the work and priorities of the council. So while it may be true that Portsmouth is generally a safe city for young people, recorded crime, actual crime and fear of crime are different. And when young people speak out to tell us what most concerns them, it's really important that we listen and respond and find solutions to make our city more accessible for all. There are already enough challenges for today's young people to face without feeling unable to walk from A to B or to spend time enjoying our great waterfront city. It's important to note that Portsmouth City Council is already doing a considerable amount with our young citizens to tackle bullying, violence and abuse. And I want to place on record my thanks to all of the council staff that are involved in this crucial work, as well as the many partner organisations that the council works with, including local charities. Unfortunately, Karen couldn't be here today to provide a deputation, but she did ask me to say something on her behalf. Karen wanted to raise, as a parent and also chair of the Portsmouth Parent Board, that she is aware of the concerns of young people and their families regarding feeling safe in the community. Parents are concerned about county lines and peer-on-peer antisocial behaviour that can lead to some young individuals feeling scared of walking to and from school and in and around their community. So it would be reassuring if more locations were part of a scheme that shows a safe place for that a young person can go to if they feel threatened by someone's behaviour. Karen also wanted to share that she thinks it would be useful to speak to young people who might feel more vulnerable for various reasons, such as mental health, ethnicity, sexuality, or identified gender. So this motion aims to build on the good work already being done by the Council, to better promote the programmes that already exist, to ensure young people get the support they need, and to explore what more can be done. One suggestion is to update the Council's website on all live projects so young people, organisations and parents can find important information in one place. We also want to work with schools by requesting that Portsmouth City Council support schools to speak to young people in age-appropriate ways about keeping safe while out in the community. This motion also asks the Council to review its existing schemes to increase public safety for young people and explore if further improvements can be made. This may mean extending the number and variety of safe spaces for young people to go to if they don't feel safe, and promoting this as a network of safe spaces across our city. Most importantly of all, the motion calls on the Council to engage local young people in the development of any new programmes about young people's safety. This includes Portsmouth Youth Cabinet, the Council of Portsmouth Students, and the Primary Council of Portsmouth Students. So, my Lord Mayor, I hope that today, for the benefit of young people in Portsmouth, colleagues from across the Council chamber will vote for this motion. Together we can improve safety, accessibility and equality in our city for this generation and future ones to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horton.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'd also, without it sounding like a mutual appreciation society, I would like to extend my thanks to Councillor Gerarda for meeting me back in last December when I raised some concern about some of the detail in the notice of motion, and I feel that collectively that we've come up with something a lot stronger and useful for reinforcing and extending current services. There may be a few people. I was hoping that Councillor Ryan Brent would be in the room, because in actual fact, when you're Cabinet Member for Children's or Adults, and there are some people in this room who've taken those roles, there's an extra layer of responsibility which comes from a statutory responsibility, which makes that scrutiny and that attention to detail about proposals and ideas and the importance of it being scrutinised. So I do think the motion now better reflects the extensive work that goes on in the Council and with our partners, including the police, the voluntary and community sector, to keep children safe, whilst acknowledging, as ably and rightly explained by Mr Cummings in his deputation, that there can never, ever be any complacency in what the Council does, as if it is enough. So the thrust of the motion is about safeguarding of young people, and I feel very strongly that we need to have a balance between protecting young people but empowering them to keep themselves safe, but also to live a life that is not driven by fear and mistrust of people. And that's a big responsibility and a careful balance that must be found. And we all have a role in that. The way I look at it in the biggest picture is that young people need to feel safe in three places: at home, at school, and everywhere else. And whether that's in organised youth provision, whether it's being out with their friends or being alone, we have a responsibility to do everything that we can to make those children and young people feel safe. And of course, omnipresent in each of those places and spaces is cyberspace, and that whilst the notice of motion hasn't focused on that, that is something that we need to consider too. But most importantly, they need to know where to go and who to go to in each of those situations when they don't feel safe. A big part of growing up is creating a life separate from your parents, your carers, and your teachers. Most important, and then sometimes these people are most importantly, and sometimes the sole adults in your life when you're young. Growing up, as we all know, is about trying new experiences, pushing boundaries, taking risks, meeting new people, making decisions, having secrets, having a private life. I'm sure all of us can come up with a few tales of what we might have got up to when we were exploring that space. Now, whilst for the majority of young people that experience is safe, albeit a little bit bumpy and emotional sometimes, we have to be mindful that for some it is not. And that is where we need to focus this attention for this motion. They can be unsafe at the hands of peers, they can be unsafe at the hands of known adults, and they can be unsafe at the hands of strangers. And the motion aims to remind us that by detailing the role the Council plays in raising awareness for all of us, with our partners and young people themselves, we need to remain alert, we need to remain vigilant, and we need to constantly change and alter practices to reflect current culture and to always speak out when we are concerned. And Councillor Gerarda focused on county lines, and we hadn't actually compared notes before today, but I also did that. And actually, I was hoping that Councillor Norton would be in the room, because in today's paper, there's a report about Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary's focus on county lines, some activities, a clampdown called the County Lines Intensification Week, and talks about how many cells that they'd interrupted, that there were, in Portsmouth alone, there were 13 arrests, 13 stop searches, 11 home visits. By doing the role that I'm doing, I've been led to see individual cases and never, ever, ever underestimate the seriousness of county lines and the impact, the devastation it has on young people. These people prey on the vulnerable, and we need to support and protect victims who are exposed to physical, emotional and financial coercion. We need to do everything we can through our partners and through the Council and us ourselves to always report, look for signs of exploitation and never ever take for granted that maybe that something is not wrong. So the resolution asks us to promote current youth services, continue to work with schools about how we teach children to stay safe, work with partners and hold each other to account, as well as working with young people in co-production of new programmes. Some of that is happening, some of it's in train, and we need to adapt to changing circumstances to never ever be complacent about this important issue.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I didn't intend to speak on this motion. There you go for the bingo players. But I thought I would just, because I think it's an obviously good motion that everyone will be happy to support. It was just because it was raised in the deputation, perhaps full council, and I meant to perhaps say this before the cabinet member had already spoken on this, but it would be helpful perhaps to receive an update via the portfolio holder or perhaps via email, if that's more appropriate, about Beachside and the issues that occurred there, and possible change to our processes to ensure that doesn't happen again, and also perhaps the future of the site and when we might see that reopening. Because obviously that's something that was very serious, and it was, I think, a one-off case, but a serious failing at that respite care home, and obviously we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. As I say, as it was raised by the deputation, I think we should note that and comment that the council is on top of that issue. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also wasn't going to give a speech, but I kind of felt that this resonated with some of the situations that I have in my ward. So I'd like to firstly thank Councillor Gerarda and Councillor Horton for bringing this motion forward. Extending and providing safe spaces for people in Portsmouth should be a basic right that we as a council can provide. I just wanted to highlight one of the points there where it says some parents and young people have told us they worry about issues like drugs, county lines and antisocial behaviour, and their fear of these crimes makes them feel unsafe in some public places. There are also additional concerns and vulnerabilities based on protected characteristics. I know many residents that worry about drugs, county lines and ASB, and I'm currently fighting for community spaces in my ward so we can create our own safe spaces which can then support the youth and elderly. So I really thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm fully in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shah.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm glad to speak on this motion, as it has been carefully worked out and has cross-party support. I have no doubt that it will be passed. So I will keep this brief. Nonetheless, I feel that it would still be useful to speak on this motion. Its contents are not especially controversial, but if improvements are carried out properly, then a positive difference could be made. The Council's obligations to ensure community safety will be greatly aided by the review of its practices and by encouraging schools and partner organizations to do so too. One hope I have from this review is that facilities and activities in the north of the city will be looked into in detail, and I would like that request included in the minutes. At present, they are not as ample as in the south, and opportunities for community improvements in Kosham and the other northern wards must be looked into. A lack of activities and places to go for young people in particular is leading to anti-social behavior. With nowhere to go and nothing to do, is it any wonder they hang around the streets oftentimes at night? Residents are justifiably encouraged, and we are even seeing people taking matters in their own hands when the police are not seen to be able to do anything. I'm referring to the Safe View patrols taking place in the north of the city. So perhaps a more sensible reaction from the Council to issues with young people is to invest in them and to give them something to do. Through my community work, I have had the opportunities to see some of the problems highlighted in this motion at first hand. In a humble way, I have tried help by arranging coffee mornings and litter picking to bring young and old together, alongside other initiatives. However, the Council has existing services and schemes in place that can have a meaningful and far-reaching impact. This motion will strengthen these schemes and services, and I am looking forward to positive changes coming about by these being reviewed and improved where possible. I commend this motion to the Council. Let's get it passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shah. Since no other members have indicated they wish to speak, I will ask Councillor Gerardo to sum up.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And I thank all councillors who've spoken on the motion for all of their contributions, and again in particular to Councillor Horton for working on this notice of motion with me. I also wanted to commend the work that councillors are doing to support young people in Portsmouth, and particularly to those who are doing the kind of voluntary work that Councillor Shah and Councillor Simpson have been outlining. So it's really fantastic that councillors are working hard in their community to do that. It's clear from the contributions that people have made that the fear of crime is often different to the actual crime, but nonetheless it does still stop people from going about their daily lives and feeling able to do that, and it can paralyse people, and hopefully the notice of motion will help to challenge that and make a positive difference. Also, what's clear is there is a prevalence of antisocial behaviour across the city, and this is plighting many communities and making life in different neighbourhoods very difficult for lots of different people. While the motion doesn't specifically aim to tackle antisocial behaviour more broadly, by having a wide range of safe spaces and a better understanding about the existing support the council provides, hopefully this will help to tackle some of those issues as well. So yes, hopefully with the support of colleagues, this motion will help to create a safer, more accessible city for all, especially our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the vote. Will those members in favour of the motion please indicate? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. We now come to motion D. Motion D on Southern Water, proposed by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Kadir. Councillor Barrett, do you propose this?
Yes, I do, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor Kadir, do you second this?
No.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Clean water is a basic human right. We know the benefits that swimming in an ocean, a lake, a river or a stream hold for us, both physically and mentally. We know how important the health of the ocean is, not just for maritime ecosystems, but for all life on Earth. Yet water companies continue to pour sewage into the ocean time and time again. Once again, monetary gain and convenience are prioritised over doing the right thing. This statement was made by Hannah Stitfall in her forward to Surfers Against Sewage's Water Quality Report in 2022. It does make for extremely uncomfortable reading, but I do believe it is truly right that this is kept firmly in the public's eye, and it's why myself and Councillor Kadir have brought this motion forward today. As mentioned in the motion, it has been discussed here in full council twice, both in 2019 and in 2021. But the reason why we wanted to bring it back today is because it is so vitally important to keep an eye on what Southern Water are doing, to hold them to account to make improvements across our city, and to make sure that they are held to account for any wrongdoings that may occur. We know that Southern Water have found themselves in trouble over the last few years, being fined £90 million due to discharges in 2021 and in 2022. They were fined a further £28.3 million and were forced to reduce customer bills, with £123 million to be paid back as a rebate to customers over a 5-year period. This might sound like a lot, but this actually equals every customer receiving £61 back over 5 years, which equates to just over £12 a year per household, which I find extremely poor. Already this year, 305 hours of confirmed sewage discharge have already been discharged into Langston Harbour. Actually, that's just to say when I submitted the motion last week. So there may have been more because there's been more rainfall since then. But that is extremely disappointing. But it's not just sewage that you will find in our waters. Drugs, antibiotics and chemicals, as well as microplastics, have been found in water sampling taken from the harbour during discharges and afterwards. And this is what is being found in our marine environment. It's affecting not just the wildlife, plant life and the ecosystem, which is delicate, but it will also affect everything we do in regards to those swimming in the water, taking part in sports, and also something very important for us as a city, tourism. Wastewater treatment plants are throughout the country and sewage outflows are installed throughout the network, yet at times we do know they can be overwhelmed when there is heavy rainfall. Interestingly though, and this is something I found out recently, in the last 12 months, Surfers Against Sewage have uncovered 143 dry spills pouring sewage into our popular swim spots across the UK. But, and importantly, this has happened at times where there has been no rainfall, which is shocking. They also found that 4 times as many dry spills from Southern Water occur compared to the next worst offender. So we're already at a poor point as a city because we have Southern Water here. And of those dry spills, 95 of them really sadly occurred at locations classified as excellent under the current testing regime, which I find extremely worrying. Quite rightly, £35,000 has been invested by this council to produce and put up signs on the waterfront to give bathers real-time information to be able to make an informed decision as to whether they want to go in the sea. My thanks go to Sarah Shreve and the Stop the Sewage campaign, as well as the Deputy for coming in today to speak on that, but also to Councillor Pitt for getting this sorted as well. But why should we, as Portsmouth residents and the council, have to pay for a failure of a company that is not our fault? We already pay monthly for them to take away and treat the sewage, not to dump it into the harbour. I therefore implore Southern Water to restart conversations we've been having with them to reimburse the council out of their huge profits for the signs already purchased and installed, for them to invest in future infrastructure on the seafront, and also to pay for the water testing Councillor Pitt has secured in Portsmouth, but also the water testing that the Langston Harbour Board wish to undertake across all sides of the harbour so that both Portsmouth and Havant are covered. I also implore them to look at getting an E. coli buoy and also to pay for the electronic signage as well. I must say, though, that support on this has been amazing. My thanks go out to all the political parties in this room for everything they've done. Our two Portsmouth MPs have been involved at a parliamentary level, and I know each party in this chamber has spoken out on the discharges. My thanks to Councillor Pitt for his work on this, as well as Councillor Smythe, who has reached out and taken the time to speak to me on this, so thank you. It is also really prudent to mention the work the Langston Harbour Board and my colleagues from both Portsmouth and Havant, who sit on the board, are doing, pushing forward in regards to further water testing when we know the number of water samples taken has fallen by 51% and there's been a 94% drop in prosecutions against water companies. I also know that there is a lot of distrust when it comes to the proposed wastewater recycling for our drinking water, and I asked Southern Water to have more public events so that the public can have a chance to look at these plans and make an informed decision as part of the consultations. A lot of people still don't understand what's going on. So my thanks for letting me speak on this motion today. I hope it's supported. There's still a lot of work to do. We have done a lot of work between all of us. I will also briefly mention my opposition spokesperson, Councillor New, who has a wonderful campaign he's running on his side of things. So we are all working together. We need to keep this in the public light to make sure that we are keeping on top of Southern Water and what they're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. I have been advised of an amendment standing in the name of Councillor Heaney and Councillor Gerarda. Councillor Heaney, you wish to propose this?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
And, sorry? This would technically fall, but it is my meeting, and I'm going to break my own rules. So, Councillor Heaney, will you please speak to your amendment? Yep. Sorry.
This is not your rules, this is all of our rules. And therefore, my understanding is if somebody's not here to move it or second it, it has to fall. It's not an option.
I will take advice on that. I am advised that we may adjourn for 30 seconds to allow Councillor Gerarda to return to her seat. Councillor Heaney, do you wish the agenda, the amendment standing in your name to be distributed?
Yes, Lord Mayor, if you're ready to do that, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gerarda, do you formally second this amendment?
Yes, sorry for needing the toilet. Sorry.
You may start when you wish, Councillor Heaney.
You need to switch me on. Oh, right, I'm on. Good. Well, just to say, the amendment is not intended to criticise the motion. It's a very good motion. I just wanted to add another item to it, which I think would help, given that it was brought up in the motion, but wasn't actually specified particularly as an action that we would take. Just before I do that, I mean, I just want to just briefly sort of say about the record of Southern Water. I mean, Councillor Barrett mentioned it, but actually if you look at it, it's even worse than she said. I did a little bit of research and found some items about this. The water companies were privatised in 1989, and they were privatised debt-free because the government decided to take on all the public debt from the previous water undertakings. And in 2008, Southern Water were fined £20.3 million by the regulator Ofwat for, quote, systematically manipulating information to conceal its true performance over an extended period of time. That's 15 years ago. They were fined £200,000 in 2013 for what a judge called persistent record of criminality and offending by dumping raw sewage. 2015, £160,000 for dumping sewage in East Worthing. 2016 again, £2 million for Margate And then Ofwat imposed another fine of £126 million in 2019 for what they called shocking failures at sewage treatment sites in Kent and Hampshire. Now, we all know about the £90 million fine that came out in 2021. And it's also worth just saying a little bit about what the judge thought about that, because some of his comments are really quite interesting. He said, after finding the company guilty, he says, these offences show a shocking and wholesale disregard for the environment, for the precious and delicate ecosystems of coastlines, for human health and for fisheries and other legitimate businesses that operate in the coastal waters. He said the company had a history of criminal activity for its previous and persistent pollution of the environment. 168 previous offences and cautions but it ignored these and not all its behaviour. There is no evidence, he said, that the company took any notice of the penalties imposed or the remarks of the courts. Its offending simply continued. And that is an utterly shocking record when you think about it. If this had been any other business that had behaved like that to its consumers and to its regulators, it would have gone out of business. And yet we are still forced to put up with what has happened here. My amendment really addresses the issue that Councillor Barrett brought up about the chemical pollutants, because that's a new issue in a sense, which hasn't got quite so much attention as sewage discharge. We obviously have Professor Alex Ford in Portsmouth, who's done a lot of work on this, both at Portsmouth and with Brunel University. And there are certainly increasing numbers of studies that highlight a wide range of chemicals present in the environment that can alter the behaviour of wildlife. In 2019, Professor Ford went to a workshop in Germany at the German Environmental Agency to look at how regulators and scientists and policymakers could work together on this. And he said we need to have a better understanding of what each of us, biologists, regulators and policymakers, need to do to best safeguard the aquatic environment. Doing studies further back in 2014, Professor Ford showed that even tiny quantities of antidepressants are affecting wildlife such as crustaceans and molluscs. And in September 22, the Channel 4 News did a report from Portsmouth about his research with Brunel University and highlighted that antidepressants and things like cocaine are affecting the ability of marine life to both reproduce and even causing them to change sex. Now, this is obviously really quite serious. So Dr. Ford again says the release of human pharmaceuticals into aquatic ecosystems is an environmental problem we should consider seriously, because the treated sewage does not get rid of many of these chemical contaminants. So what I basically asked for is to add a new 4, which says that Southern Water disclose what they propose to do to neutralise or remove chemicals and pharmaceuticals from sewage before wastewater is recycled or discharged. We need to know what they're going to do about this. They may not even have begun to address it, but it is going to be a problem, and it's one we need to start doing something about now. So I hope the amendment will be accepted, because I think it will add further pressure to the water companies to improve their performance and make sure we have a good environment, both for our wildlife and for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments? I have Councillor, and the place is open for debate. I have Councillor Lee Mason indicating that he wishes to speak, followed by Councillor Kadir.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Unlike most of the speakers today, I had every intention of speaking, so this isn't some spur of the moment, though I do intend to keep it short and sweet as ever. I'd like to congratulate this notice of motion going forward. It is a lot of cross-party work, has been shown. We have worked closely on this, and it is good to see that we can move forward working together for the people of the city together. We have also worked with our neighbouring areas. Have had very similar motions go through their council within the last few weeks, and they've also been taking a strong line on this. Part 3 of this always seems to be working. I have received a response from Southern Water. The letter, I have sent it out and you were sent it by an Environment Officer, but to the letter that myself, Councillor Vernon Jackson and Councillor Alex Rennie sent to them. So they are agreeing to meet with us, and I've already had agreement from Havant, our opposite numbers. Their way forward is myself, Councillor Barrett, our opposite numbers in Havant of Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Linger, along with our Environment Officer, should meet with Southern Water. They are starting to suggest they might pay for water testing, but it has been shown already that the testing they're doing is not working. And the fact they had to go back and test the equipment because it was showing such high levels, 700 times the limit, meant that they thought the equipment was broken rather than the water was destroyed. And it turns out the water was destroyed. So I'm hoping we do have that moving forward. I also want to pay tribute to one of my departing colleagues who has been very instrumental in setting up Conservative Friends of the Ocean, along with some of our other colleagues. But Councillor Bob New has done a lot of work on this, and I know he's a very keen environmentalist, so we do have cross-board support. And it's not just what Southern Water are doing in the harbour and the ocean whilst that is bad. I do have to think of my residents. More inland flooding sites, Salisbury Road, Knowsley Road, horrific scenes of sewage coming out of the street, flooding people's gardens, dead rats outside the school, all sorts of horrors that people should not be subjected to. And I'd like to pay tribute to our MP, Henny Mordaunt, who has dragged Southern Water to the table with us, but we are still struggling to try and get moves forward. So it's not just the ocean, it is inland, and it does cause a major problem. But I'd like to support this notice of motion, thank the Council for giving me this chance to speak on it, and look forward to having the meetings with myself, Councillor Barrett, and our opposite numbers to try and progress this forward. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Kadir, followed by Councillor New.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. My ward loves the environment, whether it is Swan at Baffins Pond, children planting wildflowers at the trees at Tamewood Park, Great Salton, and seeing the birds in Milton Common. My residents hate when the environment is ruined. That is why they get angry when they see Southern Water put sewage into Langstone Harbour, part of which is in my ward. They get angered when they see Southern Water behave as if nothing is wrong. That has happened too many times over the past few years. If Southern Water thinks they're above the law, or at least the people who pays the wages, even £90 million fines do not stop them. Unsurprisingly, local people do not trust them when they say they will change. They just see a company that is out of control and out of touch. Change that, and it will go some way towards restoring the trust of the people who make the profits. This motion offers them some simple ways to do that. They come from some basic principle. The first has been around for decades. A polluter pays. The polluters should pay for the signs that say when discharge have occurred, so they do not have to put up with the filth. The polluter should pay for the regular water testing. The polluter should pay for the E. coli boy at South Sea. The second is be open with the people who keep giving jobs. We know our city will have more homes and more businesses. Southern Water needs to be open with us on what that means for sewage infrastructure and water recycling and what choices there. The third is the system must change. When you tackle Southern Water, the argument is always the same. We are working within the rules. Well, if that is the true, the rules must change. So they put the customer, not the company, first. The Tory government said it's doing just that, yet it has told Southern Water it has to cut, not scrap, cut sewage going into the place like South Sea Seafront, Langstone Harbour. But 23rd 5, that is not good enough. We owe it to our children and grandchildren to do so much better. As a council, we have worked together to try to stop Southern Water from greedily taking the money while polluting our seas and harbours. That must continue. The motion offers some simple ways in which we can carry this on and ask you to back it. I thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for your maiden speech, Councillor Kadir. I now have Councillor New, followed by Councillor Weems.
Mayor, and thank you to colleagues as well for bringing this motion forward today. And can I just place on record, it's actually been very, very nice and harmonious to work with both Councillor Kimberly Barrett and Councillor Charlotte Dorada as the opposition numbers on this and the Cabinet member. When Councillor Pitt spoke about the signs, I thought they were a good idea. I completely support that the people who are causing the upset to our residents should absolutely pay for these signs. And it's disappointing to hear that it sounds like, forgive me if I'm wrong, please do correct me, that Southern Water are kind of like playing chase on this issue as well. Not surprised, I have to say. And I would just add a bit of context, perhaps, to some of the things that have been said today. I have complete sympathy with the frustration, and I do completely understand why residents wouldn't trust this company and other water companies. How can you trust a company that doesn't even know what its own infrastructure is? It doesn't even have detailed blueprints and plans of its own infrastructure, Lord Mayor. To the point that the residents that Councillor Lee Mason referred to in Cosham, the reason why they've been so badly let down isn't because there's just some weird antiquated problem with the infrastructure not being fit for modern day urban areas and additional houses that have come online in those areas. It's that they don't actually know where their problems are. So they know roughly where they are. They know when there's like a 90-degree bend that goes under an allotment. They know that there's going to be problems with having to dig up allotments, as we've seen because of the Aquin stuff, etc. down in Milton. They just kind of don't really know their own system. So therefore, it always feels to me like they go for the head in the sand, path of least resistance. We're continuing to investigate. Well, you know, that only goes so far, and that's just a stalling exercise too, as far as I'm concerned. And while they've given assurances to politicians across this city that they plan to end the majority of discharging, and I think most residents here would be pragmatic that you cannot 100% eradicate those discharges when there are large storm events and climate change happening. You know, they should be rare and in between. Like, I still remember things like the storm of 1987, which by probably today's standard, if that was to happen now, probably wouldn't have been that significant. But at the time it was, because it was a one-off event. And I think most people would be pragmatic towards that. But they don't talk in those terms. And how could anyone even trust that they even have a plan in place to even look to cut down, let alone get to whatever, I think it's like 97% eradication, which I think most people would accept. I do think that the people of Portsmouth, by and large, are good and pragmatic people. But I don't think that we'll ever get to that point with them, you know, and I'm saying that I think as a realist. You know, and I'm a bit of an optimist on many of these things, but having met with Southern Water many times, you know, one of my favourite sayings has kind of come out as a bit of a harsh, keep the metaphorical boot on their neck, because, you know, as was rightly alluded to here in this chamber, people at the top of that organisation are making huge amounts of money. Wherever that's going, who knows? But it ain't into the infrastructure as you would think. And given the fact that they have got probably, I mean, I dread to think what their PR staff, you know, what their mental health is like. I mean, it would seem to me that, you know, yeah, I mean, it's hard to even imagine how they can even try and turn around the terrible damage that they've done to their company's reputation. Well, there is a way that they can do it, and that would be to get serious and actually not only look to fix the problems that they have caused by not investing in their infrastructure adequately, but it would be to actually give serious commitment and also showing a bit of humility, I think, to the people of Portsmouth by funding things like these signs, E. coli boys, and actually going a few steps over, because we found out through the work that's being done by the organisations such as Stop the Sewage and by the Hailing Sewage Watch, people who are fantastic, by the way, that actually some of the systems that they said we've put in place weren't even working, or they were, I don't want to say that they were manipulating the information, but they were certainly delaying information. And it was only because of those keen-eyed, you know, they're members of the public, you know, they've all got jobs, they just care about their environment and their community, Lord Mayor, that they were exposed again. So one of their sincere gestures turned out to be not particularly good. So I would support this motion, and I hope that if they're listening and watching, and I'm sure they will be, that they, frankly, pull their heads out their asses, Lord Mayor, if you'll forgive me. And actually, if they want to go some way towards improving the situation, they could start by getting into a room with the leader of the council and Councillor Pitt and cabinet member and start to make some of these gestures genuine, fund them, put their money where their mouth is, other than through fines, and look to make a better way forward that seems sincere and that works for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor New. I have Councillor Weems, followed by Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. You can tell it's Councillor New's final council meeting. But I just wanted to echo some of the sentiments that he has put forward, as well as some of my colleagues. And I also want to put on record my thanks to Councillor Pitt and to Councillor Barrett when they met with Rob and I when we discussed our motion for the ocean. I think most councillors here, if not all, really care about our environment, especially the marine environment. And I'm glad to see that this motion is put forward to the council today, because I will be supporting it, and I imagine a lot of my colleagues will be too. I think possibly I may be one of the only councillors who was unfortunate enough to visit Bud's Farm recently and see the proposed water recycling plant in person. And although it does seem like a fantastic idea, because maybe for the first time in Southern Water's existence, they are trying to plan ahead. And they showed some of their plans to me, where they had different membranes put in place so they can recycle the affluent going into Havant Thicket and make sure that the water will be drinkable for people, and the various fail-safes that they're going to put in, and the redundancies as well. And every time I was there, I always led back to the question, well, why aren't you investing in other areas of your infrastructure? I mean, it's fantastic what they're doing with the water recycling, and I think, you know, when they bring residents on board, a lot of people may turn their heads and say, you know, we need this. You know, the population is growing exponentially. We're going to obviously have a lot of water shortages in the next 50 years due to climate change, and it's great that they're planning ahead for that. But then you naturally, as a resident, you say, well, why can't you do this in other areas of your business? And I think what Councillor New alluded to, if you don't put the boot on their neck the entire time, they're not going to pay for anything. We've met with them several times through various stakeholder management meetings. For example, we met with them through Conservative Friends of the Ocean, which my colleague and I have created. I've met with them through work, and each time they always overpromise, and they always say, we'll get this done, you know, we're taking your concerns on board, and then a year later, nothing has been done. One of the points that needs to be addressed is the Beach Boy review. That has taken years to actually get off the ground. And like Rob, Councillor New, mentioned, it's actually residents that are putting the work and putting that push on them to actually get things changed. And it shouldn't really be up to them. It should obviously be up to the people in charge. And I do thank our MPs, Stephen Morgan and Penny Mordaunt, for pushing this change forward. But until Southern Water actually address the concerns that residents have, I don't trust a word they say, frankly. The only thing I would actually mention about the motion, I just wondered if when we write to Southern Water, we'll be able to ask for, well, I wouldn't say we're asking for the earth in this motion, but if we could actually ask for different monitoring stations or other forms of water management across the city, not just on the seaside. I think, I don't know their infrastructure in depth, but possibly they possibly they release affluent in different areas of the city, and I'm not a water expert, but maybe if they release something in Lancaster Harbour, it obviously comes round into the seafront, and I just think if we can monitor the entire city and Southern Water pay for it, I think that might go a long way in actually being able to have that that data we can put forward to them in future meetings. So yes, I'll be voting for this motion. I just wanted to put my word of thanks to everyone who supports it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wimms. I have Councillor Winnington, followed by Councillor Bosher.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Barrett and Kadir for bringing this motion, and for everyone for their support for it so far. I was on the Langston Harbour Board for 9 years, and it was in my first year on the board that we first had the conversations about the dumping in Langston Harbour from Southern Water. Certainly, in my recollection, I know that was going on before then as well, as Councillor Lee Mason and Hugh Mason, the two Councillor Masons who had been on the boards for many years before I was on there, would know. And obviously, many people in this room have been on the board, are either on the board now or have been on the board in the past, and that know that this has been a constant thorn in the sides for the year. But I'm not just speaking here today as a councillor who used to be on the Langston Harbour Board. I'm also the council's representative on the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, and I draw the point to conservation, but also fisheries. But the conservation side, of course, because one of the things we're looking to do is about the fact that we have a harbour Langston Harbour, which is, has various designations because it is a very environmentally sensitive harbour. And what happens? Southern Water do unauthorised dumping of sewage into that harbour on a regular basis, which means it has an impact on conservation because we have some very, very sensitive species in there. But it also means it has an impact on fishing. There are various bylaws that the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority has, and one of them is about bottom dredge bylaws, and you have things about when you can fish for certain shellfish in particular and whatever around the time. And in Langston Harbour, you can virtually do none of that fishing at all because the stocks are so low these days, partially because of overfishing in the past, but also because getting the stocks back up is really difficult to do when you have not got good quality water. And why haven't we got good quality water? It's because Southern Water keep dumping in the harbour. As a councillor with Councillors Smith and Symes, we of course are the ward of the city which has the mouth of the harbour, which is abuts it, and therefore as Councillor Weems and Councillor New were talking about, Councillor Weems was talking about, we have the impact directly onto the seafront from that. So of course anything that goes into Langston Harbour comes out onto our seafront and onto the seafront at Heading Islands. So it has that wider impact as well, and has that impact on people who use that for bathing. Langston Harbour itself is a bit different, it's a bit different frontage, but our fronts in Hayling and in Portsmouth are used for bathing. So Southern Water, what have they been doing? I haven't used my liberal quotations book for a while, but I thought as a few people were leaving today, I thought I'd better do. But David Lloyd George, he said something very interesting about Eamon de Valera, which I think can be attributed to Southern Water. He says negotiating with de Valera is like trying to pick up mercury with a fork. Now, I think that's a very appropriate thing for Southern Water, because trying to negotiate with them is like picking up mercury with a fork, because you don't know what excuse they're going to come up with next. You try to say, can you do something about this? Oh, well, no, we can't do that. Oh, we can do that. And then you try to go do something else. And it says, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. It is a constant struggle that they give undertakings, platitudes, but they never actually do anything. I was at a meeting of the annual engagement meeting that the Langston Harbour Board Advisory Committee does, probably in about 2018, I think it was, at the Andrew Simpson Centre. And Southern Water were one of the organisations that were speaking to us. They were like that we had various talks on things, and they came. And it was, as you can imagine, quite a hostile audience for Southern Water. So at least they did come up and speak to us, but they might not have bothered. Because what was the point? They just gave endless platitudes. And here we are, 5 years later, 6 years later, whenever it was, nothing has changed. So it is about kicking them up the backside. I won't do the boot on the neck thing, but kicking them up the backside, saying this is what we want you to do. And it's not just us talking as the council, it's us working with the harbour boards. We have our harbour board members, we have the chair of the harbour board here. It's working with our neighbouring council, not just to do with Langston Harbour, but more generally as well. It's working with our MPs, but it is saying also to the government, you have to clamp down on these businesses who do lip service, who are supposed to be there to provide a service and not just make profit for them. Thank you so much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. I have Councillor Bosher, followed by Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Councillor Whittington, I actually got a WhatsApp message at 13:47 saying Whittington has his book of quotations. I won't say the rest of what was actually in that particular message, but I'll leave that to the imagination of others. Lord Mayor, I find this notice of motion utterly depressing, if I'm brutally honest. And it can be really summed up in about 8 words in the second paragraph. Full councillors debated motions in 2019 and 2021 regarding the harmful discharges of Southern Water. Says it all, really, and I suspect that if I go back over my time, there might not necessarily be notice of motion, but I'm sure it wouldn't be the first time it's been mentioned in this chamber in some shape or form. I don't intend to say very much. I won't go as far as to say I wasn't planning to speak, because I did have a few notes here. But I was sort of drawn to what my colleague, Councillor Mason, actually said, and he used words like dragged to sum up Southern Water's attitude towards this. And they're quite right. I've been to public meetings with Southern Water, particularly around the issues that we've had in the Cossam area of Salisbury Road, which we've also had in Drayton and Farlington in areas there as well. And what struck me is what they've eminently summed up in the letter that may well have been circulated in their second paragraph, which I will read. While seawater is not sterile and impacted by several factors, including storm releases, agricultural runoff, birds and animal matter, we must be a catalyst for change. Well, one wonders who they mean by we in that particular event, in that particular statement. And this includes slowing of the flow of rainwater in the community and educating the public on what can and can't be put down the drains. Well, I like to think that the public know what can and can't be put down the drains, and it strikes me that Southern Water is seeking to blame everybody else for their own failings. Now, I went to the Southern Water meetings, as I said earlier on, and even though it affected a lot of Drayton and Farlington, and I must pay tribute to my 2 Cossam colleagues in Councillors Mason and Atkins, and to the MP for facilitating all that, Penny Mordaunt, what became abundantly clear when I went to that meeting is it's every other bugger's fault. Pardon my language, Lord Mayor. When you get flooding there, it's Portsmouth City Council's fault, according to Southern Water, because where we've taken out trees, we've covered over the tree pits. So it's our fault that the roads flood. They blame residents for putting this wrong stuff down into the system. They even blamed a problem that we had in Drayton and Farlington with a road that goes up the hill, so it's got a slope on it, for having the wrong sort of camber on it. I kid you not, the wrong sort of camber. These are the sorts of things that these people have been coming out with time and time again. The other one that regularly comes is we've got a pumping station that's down by the Manor Pub, people know. I get fed up with the number of complaints about the stink in that particular area where they're not doing it. It's all to do with the infrastructure. And what I would really like is for Southern Water to actually put their hand up and say, we need to address this issue, we need to invest in it, and stop blaming everybody else for their own shortcomings. Depressingly, I think that is probably not going to happen. I noticed that they turned around and said, we're quite happy to meet the council in April, when we're in Purder, knowing full well that we're going to be in Purder. So what are we going to do? You know, it's everything they seem to be doing is doing everything they can to create an issue out of nothing when they should actually be addressing it. I totally support the sentiments of the notice of motion, and I will be supporting the notice of motion. But I suspect that somewhere in Southern Water Towers, wherever that may be, that there's going to be a carry-on regardless attitude. We'll get the PR puff done and dusted and sorted. This will move on. The next fine will come along, and then we'll move on. And I think that at some point, at some time in the future, when there may well be different councillors in this chamber, there'll be something very similar on the paperwork. Now, I hope I'm not the cynic, and I hope there's going to be something positive out of this. I just think that we've been here before. I've got a horrible feeling we're going to be here again, Lord Mayor.
Oh dear. Thank you, Councillor Bosher. Councillor Pitt.
I do like these debates when we all agree with each other, isn't it? Far more pleasant. Indeed, and all the analogies of violence being so politely delivered. The point I wanted to make, Lord Mayor, was that there was a report in our local paper last week when this notice of motion was published, and there was obviously renewed interest in the council's cross-party and united lobbying, and likewise with our MPs. And at the end of that report, it said that Southern Water had said that they had notified the council of a willingness to pay. So I went bouncing into my CNL briefing on Friday morning saying they're going to cough up the cash, are they? To which I got, well. So as Councillor Boche has just been identifying, there's always an excuse. Laughably, what they want to do is curate the messaging. So they want to be in control of what goes out on the digital boards if they pay for their installation and have their branding on it. Now, the lack of self-awareness of a company that thinks they are in any position to be promoting themselves around this issue is laughable. And as Councillor Rob New said earlier on, their PR department must be having a total meltdown. Well, I think the very idea that they're going to find a positive way to spin the necessity of having digital signs on the seafront, I mean, what kind of advertising they'll want included, the mind boggles. But the response was no. And we will await their next retort, depending on what the latest nonsense is that they managed to dream up. We've been absolutely clear. We want you to pay for these things because you're at fault and it's your responsibility, Southern Water. It is not our fault, it's your fault. And therefore, you must pay for these things, and we're not going to stop asking you to pay for these things. However, we're also not going to ignore the needs of the public in making sure this information is able to get out there, and it's very important that we do so in the most technologically efficient way that we can. So we remain committed to doing that, but we will keep turning up the pressure on them because their response is never acceptable and never proportionate given the appalling damage they're causing to our coastline. I do very much welcome the really positive discussions that we've been having with Havant Borough Council recently around their willingness to come forward and step into the space of doing the testing in Langston Harbour, which enables us to stretch our current resource even further so that we'll be able to continue to do Southsea and Portsmouth Harbour longer. And I've actually asked Richard Lee, the head of regulatory services at the council, to bring forward some costing so that we continue to allocate resource for this, because all the time we are working together with the Langston Harbour Board helping to facilitate the testing in Langston Harbour, with Havant Borough Council paying for and doing that testing on that side, and with us doing the testing along Southsea and in Portsmouth Harbour, we are showing that we are united and collaborative, and that we are not going to take no for an answer. So Southern Water, cough up the cash, stop making excuses that nobody wants to hear, and accept your responsibility for being a dirty polluter.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I now call upon the proposer, Councillor Barrett, to sum up and to indicate whether she wishes the amendment to be subsumed into her motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Firstly, thank you everyone so much for taking part in this debate. I reached out to all of you anyway beforehand because Southern Water had been in contact with a number of us around their consultation process. And when I reached out to them, they only wanted to brief me, which I thought was completely out of order because it affects every single one of us, all our wards, all our residents. So it shouldn't just be me to get the information, it should be all of us. As Councillor Mason knows, it's been a real struggle to get to that point. They are willing to meet and brief us all as a council, but only if I provide the questions beforehand so they can see exactly what we're going to ask them and prepare themselves, which hasn't been ideal. But thank you, colleagues all across the chamber who have submitted your questions. I have submitted them to Southern Water. Actually, I finalised them today because I had some questions from Megan, who's the Environmental Officer from Langston Harbour Board, and I wanted to include those as well. However, when I had a brief conversation with Southern Water, they suggested that they would hold this briefing in shock horror April or the first week of May. So I know, you can't make it up really, can you? But what I wanted to say was that there has been one word in particular that's come up during this debate, and that's trust. And you know what? It's not trust, it's lack of trust. We have lack of trust with Southern Water. Our residents have lack of trust with Southern Water because they have not performed as they have meant to. They've polluted our waters. They are not taking responsibility. And I completely agree with Councillor Beauchamp. You know, we've been in this situation in 2019, 2021, previous to that as well. I hope to God we're not doing this next year or 2 years' time, 3 years' time. But you know what? If we have to do it, then let's carry on doing it. Let's make sure that we highlight every single fault that they're doing. If they're not looking after the network, if they're doing discharges illegally, if they're doing all these discharges and they're giving residents back the equivalent of £12 a year for what they're doing to our natural environment, it's quite frankly disgusting. So as much as I don't want to be here in 2 years' time repeating the same message, I am more than happy to make sure that we hold them to account on every single thing that they do, because it is completely out of order. And we are a beautiful island city. We are surrounded by water. We are a waterfront city with tourism that involves water sports. We have our water sports centre and lots of activities going on. No one wants to be going by on their paddleboard with a load of poo floating by them, do they? And it has happened before. We know that people are getting sick when they go out in the water. It is completely unfair to our residents to be having this occur time and time again. And my apologies, I can't remember who said it, but the infrastructure was mentioned. We know that we have a Victorian sewage network that's not up to standard, and with further building or things going on, we know that that infrastructure needs to be updated, and it's not. It's not being focused on. Other areas are being focused on at the moment, but this is a prime thing that needs to be focused on. The same issue, as Councillor Mason mentioned, the pumping stations. Obviously, it's just on the border of Eastney and Milton. We've got a pumping station down there. Residents, I know Councillor Vernon Jackson has had residents message him and call him because of the smell. It's been completely awful, the noise, and it's just really appalling. So I thank everyone for supporting this motion. I will bring this time and time again to full council if I need to. But also thank you to Councillor Heaney and Councillor Gerarda. We are more than happy to accept this amendment to the motion. We think it's very important. As you said, it's not just sewage discharge, it's all the other things that go in with it as well. And as was mentioned by Ms Snaith, microplastics is also a huge issue that we're finding across the board, and we're finding them washed up on our beaches. And in the fish that we are eating, we are finding that in there. And that is not good for us to be consuming as well. And it's not good for the environment. So I just want to thank you so much, everyone, for such a good debate today. Although it's really disappointing that we're here again, I think it's been really productive. And I look forward to working with you on this going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the vote on the motion as amended, which is now the substantive motion. Will those in favour please indicate? That, I think, is unanimous. Thank you. We now come to motion E, Stop the Knock. Local authority debt collection practices proposed by Councillor Corkery and seconded by Councillor Mellor. Do you propose this, Councillor Corkery?
I propose the motion in my name, Lord Mayor.
And do you second this, Councillor Mellor?
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I shall shortly call upon the proposer, Councillor Corkery, to present and speak to his motion. Before I do, can I remind councillors of the briefing notes circulated via email by the Section 151 officer yesterday, hard copies of which are available at this meeting. Councillor Corkery, would you like to present and speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. And apologies in advance if my speech in this motion breaks the consensus that's been forming here today. I do get a bit bored sometimes when we all agree with each other too much, so that may or may not continue. First, Lord Mayor, I just want to remind people about the content of the motion, because it seems to be contested about what we're trying to do and what we're saying. So I'm just going to remind people about what's actually in the motion, and then I'm going to refer to some of the points that have been made in this interesting briefing note that's been circulated. So too many Portsmouth households live in constant fear of bailiffs knocking their door. The poorest and most vulnerable do suffer disproportionately from debt issues, and the local authority should not be actively adding to their woes. 1 in 2 adults with debts has a mental health problem. 1 in 4 people with a mental health problem is also in debt. Debt can cause and be caused by mental health problems. Those on the lowest incomes in our city used to be eligible for council tax support of up to 100% of their liability. However, this level of support was cut in 2016, so now even the poorest have to pay at least 20% of their council tax bill. Despite their public service remit, local authorities have some of the most stringent debt collection practices of all creditors. Debts owed to councils often end up in court, and council tax is the only debt where a debtor can be sentenced to a custodial sentence for non-payment. In 2018-19, Portsmouth City Council instructed bailiffs to collect debts from individuals and businesses on 17,534 occasions. That was an increase of 77% since 2016-17. Of those bailiff referrals, 6,011 related to council tax debts. There is divergence between local authorities regarding how affordability is assessed and appropriate repayment plans are calculated. The Standard Financial Statement produced by the Money and Pension Service provides a consistent, fair and industry-recognised method of working out affordable repayments for residents in financial difficulty. So what we're asking Council to do is to support the Money Advice Trust campaign called Stop the Knock, which would then call on Council to firstly make a clear public commitment to reduce the Council's use of bailiff over time. Secondly, to review the Council's signposting to free debt advice, including phone and online channels. Third, to adopt the Standard Financial Statement to objectively assess affordability. Fourth, to review the formal policy covering indebted residents in vulnerable circumstances. Fifth, to consider following examples set by other local authorities by exempting council tax support recipients from bailiff action. And lastly, to sign the Citizens Advice and Local Government Association Council Tax Protocol and review the authority's current practice against the Money and Pension Service's supportive council tax recovery toolkit. So now moving on to the briefing note that has been prepared for the leader and, as I understand, circulated at his request. I'm not sure if this has been made available publicly or if just people in the chamber, but I think it would be useful, obviously, if we're going to refer to it in the meeting today, for this to be added perhaps to the minutes so that anyone watching along can then access it should they need to. I think I also just want to note, obviously, this is a piece of analysis produced by, I guess, from the perspective of finance officers and accountants, and that's not to denigrate those worthy professions, but I may suggest that if it had been another part of the council who produced such an analysis, we may have got a slightly different spin on it. I mean, say, for example, if we'd asked the money advisors employed by our local housing officers who deal with people in debt on a daily basis and are kind of accredited to provide specialist money and debt advice, I think we probably would have a very different form of analysis before us. So just to quickly run through some of the key points contained within it. Firstly, to kind of clarify, I guess, some points, because there seems to me some suggestion within the briefing note that actually what this motion is about and what the Money Advice Trust campaign is about getting wealthy people and people who can afford to pay off the hook by giving them a kind of a free rein, basically, not to pay their debts. Clearly, that's not what we're talking about. Clearly, that's not what the Money Advice Trust is campaigning for. This campaign and motion very clearly relates specifically to vulnerable and low-income households when they fall into council tax arrears. The analysis also talks about the legal duties to collect council tax. Yes, of course, we agree. Don't think anyone is disputing that. However, this motion and this campaign is not about whether to collect, it's about how to collect and how enforcement action should be pursued if there are then issues where people fall into arrears. In terms of the Standard Financial Statement, this is an objective and fair assessment of household finances produced by the national experts in the field. At the moment, Portsmouth City Council does not have consistent practice across different services. So, for example, revenues and benefits will take one approach to financial assessments, the housing officers and money advisors may well take another, and social care another. We think it would be useful to provide a consistent process across the local authority. We do recognise that it's good that bailiff use has fallen fairly significantly since the original figures that were provided as part of the campaign. We would perhaps ask the leader of the council, if that is the person that's going to respond on behalf of the administration, why that has happened. Why were those levels so high in the first place? Why have they fallen? What has happened? Has it been a change of policy or a change in practice? And if we could just hear some more detail of that, that would be useful. I know I'm running out of time, but just to kind of quickly cover off my points, there are some interesting choices of language within the analysis. I think the reference to, quote, some residents on council tax support choosing not to pay and electing to spend their disposable income elsewhere, I think is perhaps slightly tone deaf to the current cost of living crisis we're experiencing, where people are facing those difficult choices. But they're difficult choices between heating and eating, not difficult choices between spending money on council tax or perhaps some other, what people may consider to be frivolous activity. So just to conclude, Lord Mayor, this motion is about ensuring our local authority adopts the most ethical and most effective debt collection practices towards those who fall into arrears. These proposals, produced by the Money and Pension Service, the Money Advice Trust, the Citizens Advice and the Local Government Association, set out the accepted best practice and good governance within the money and debt advice sector, and I hope we will all vote to endorse these initiatives.
Thank you, Councillor Corkery. I have been advised of an amendment standing in the name of Councillor Sanders and Councillor Vernon Jackson. Councillor Sanders, do you propose this amendment?
I do propose this amendment. I'd be delighted if it is circulated before I start my remarks.
Circulated before you speak. Councillor Vernon Jackson, do you second this amendment?
Happy to do so. Can reserve my right to speak.
Could the amendment be circulated, please? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. We've circulated this amendment because we wanted to strike a balance. The note that Councillor Corkery refers to from the Section 151 officer says, and I quote, "The likely additional cost of these measures is not addressed within the notice of motion." Under our rules, that means that the notice of motion should fall. And we could very easily say no to debating it today. That would be wrong, because that will be denying the salient points that Councillor Corkery and Councillor Mellor have raised in their motion. I do not intend to cancel Councillor Corkery and Councillor Mellor. Other people may have tried to, but I do not intend to, and neither does the Liberal Democrat group, because there are real points here. There are real points about people living in hardship. There are real points about how we treat them well and how we treat them decently in a cost of living crisis. And I do not want to cancel those points in this debate this afternoon. And that's why we have taken the two things that we think are new commitments to this authority and tone them down a tad, because we're interested in any way in which we can try and help. So I want to run through some of the points that Councillor Corkery made. The first thing is the Stop the Knock campaign isn't new. Looking on the website this afternoon, it dates from 2019. So it's at least 4 years old. And Councillor Corkery talks about the situation in 2019. Since then, referrals to enforcement agents have fallen by 56%. The reason we are prepared to cope with the first point in the motion, which is around committing to fewer bailiffs, is that fewer bailiffs are being used. The Section 151 officer confirmed that to me this afternoon. So we're already doing some of the things that are in your motion. Indeed, we as a council are going beyond some of the things that are in your motion. We are going beyond the standard financial statement approach when assessing affordability, because the lesson we learnt from the bedroom tax several years ago was that actually you treat people as humans and you treat people as individuals, and you assess their individual circumstances rather than the generic approach that is on offer. We're also prepared to amend rather than cancel the motion, because actually there are some things that we do already. We already fund a free, impartial and confidential advice service. It's called Advice Portsmouth, and that helps people with debts. As Councillor Corkery has already identified, there are money advisors already dealing with many of the most vulnerable people in our city, those people in housing associations. And also support is available via both the Hive Portsmouth and the new cost of living hub. So in many cases, actually adopting this would take this council backwards, not forwards, which we believe is the opposite of what Councillor Corkery and Councillor Mellor want us to do. And that actually is important, because also Councillor Corkery has outlined things that are in fact incorrect. If we adopt the Stop the Knock campaign, the first item on its website does talk about using it not just for people who are vulnerable, but people who are businesses who have buggered off and left this council in the lurch, left this council with debts, left cities with people. I remember going to Paulsgrove, going to the Healthy Living Centre in Paulsgrove. Councillor Madgwick is now awake, I'm delighted. Going in there to see dentists who had buggered off, who had left behind dentist chairs, they'd left behind toys, they'd left behind cots, they'd even left behind some milk, which had curdled a bit, I have to say. And yet, if we adopt the Stop the Knock approach, it's not just the vulnerable, it will be that business that will benefit from it. That is morally wrong and the polar opposite of what Councillor Mellor and Councillor Corkery want to do. So our amendment doesn't cancel what they're saying, because that will be wrong. They raise many key issues. But what it does do is give us the chance to reflect the council's current situation, which is often much further forwards than in the motion, explain a bit more about where we are, and enable us to consider things, because as an administration, and we've just had 45 minutes of this on Southern Water, we want to work with people. I know Councillor Corkery dislikes the consensus of this afternoon, but we want to work with people so that we can actually provide a decent service that is tailored to individual need, not necessarily tailored to a campaign that is 4 years old. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. I now have Councillor Mellor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with the Chamber 4 case studies that myself and Councillor Corkery have actually dealt with. So, case study number 1. Mr. X is a disabled resident with severe mental health issues. He told us that on one day last week, the bailiffs visited or called him 6 times in one day. He has repeatedly told them he is going through the process of getting a debt relief order, and he doesn't have the money to pay them, but they are continuing to contact him in a way that he now feels constitutes harassment. Case study 2. Portsmouth City Council bailiffs have requested that Mrs B pay back £189.17 per month. This amount is unaffordable and is pushing her further into debt. She is struggling to make ends meet. She is a single mum to 2 children and is in receipt of universal credit. Case study 3. Mrs D was also being visited by bailiffs during COVID lockdown in relation to a council tax debt, despite being vulnerable and shielding. The bailiffs had previously requested £150 from her next carer's allowance payment and £150 from her next universal credit payment, which is clearly unaffordable. She called the council to try and arrange a payment plan, but was directed to contact the bailiffs again. Case study 4. Also during lockdown, Mr Y called us about a council tax debt which had been passed to bailiffs, who were visiting his home regularly during lockdown, which he was concerned about as he has a disabled son who was vulnerable. He told me he has repeatedly tried to come to affordable arrangements with the bailiffs, but they kept on rejecting his offers and insisting on amounts which he couldn't afford. So in conclusion, these bailiffs are acting on behalf of Portsmouth City Council. Therefore, Portsmouth City Council is responsible for their actions and treatment of vulnerable people. More should be done to ensure the highest possible ethical standards are being upheld and that vulnerable people on low incomes are not harassed for money they do not have. So please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. I have Councillor Heaney to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Members may not remember, this motion, similarly worded, was actually presented to the council meeting in 2021, in December. And at that stage, it was ruled out of order on the basis of Standing Order 41J because of the fact that it didn't identify where money would come from. So that's what happened to the motion last time. I clarified whether the motion was exactly worded as it was before, but it hasn't. It's been a minor amendment. One part has been changed. Instead of in 5 saying that exempt council tax support repurpose for bailiff action, it says consider doing that. So it was interesting that the motion is fairly similar to the one that was outlined last time. Now, when I got the council agenda, I read this and I thought this looks similar, and then I thought, is it going to be rolled out? I thought, well, no, it's gone through the process. It's been allowed, so it must have gone through. Then we get a note sent to us on Monday. I got it at 10:51. It says, Dear Councillor, the lead has asked me to prepare a briefing on the above motion for all councillors. I've attached this for you so you can consider it in advance of the council meeting tomorrow. The briefing was actually written on the 9th of March, and I was just a little surprised we were given it on the Monday before the meeting, i.e. when some of us are working and don't have time to consider all of the detail. I presume the request from the leader must have come rather late on to set it out. It would have been more helpful if he'd said, sent it out on a Friday. We could have considered it. Because I asked some questions about the briefing note. And it's quite interesting. I mean, Councillor Sanders made some comments about the content, basically implying that the motion is all about letting everyone off from any debts. And that's what the motion is saying. Well, look, it doesn't say that. Well, that's what you were saying. I mean, you're shaking your head at me, but that's what you were saying. You said anyone who's got any debts could be let off on the basis of this motion. But it's not what it says. It quotes some statistics about debt and debt recovery, but it doesn't actually say that it asks for anyone to be taken off debt recovery. It talks about the vulnerable. Now, when I asked for some clarification on the advice in the note, because there's quite a lot of detail in there, I was advised that the motion was acceptable in the sense that, and it says that the motion is worded that it calls on the Cabinet to, which implies a review rather than a decision at this point. So all of the things that Councillor Corky have been asking for are, in a sense, asking the Cabinet to consider, because we can't mandate the Cabinet to do anything. We can ask the Cabinet to do something, and the motion does do that. But if the Cabinet doesn't want to do it, we can't make them. So all of the things that are in that motion could be considered by the Cabinet, and then the Cabinet can make a decision about whether they wish to adopt them or not adopt them. So I really do find it rather curious that we are being sort of bombarded with information prior to try to get us to vote this motion down, which I think is a rather odd tactic to do. I mean, yes, we need to consider all the information, but if we're going to have this information, we need to have it in good time. And I'm just suspicious that this is really an attempt to push the motion out because the Cabinet don't really want to deal with it. But I noticed the slight change of position in that the amendment seems to suggest they do want to deal with it. So why don't they just accept the motion and just review it and then come back with their decisions about what they wish to do?
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. I have Councillor Adeniran.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Corkery and Coste-Mellor for bringing this motion forward. I would like to support this motion and address a pressing issue that affects too many households in our city. Sending red letters to residents, in particular to those with lowest income, will have a devastating effect on their mental health. It is a problem that causes great anxiety and distress for many vulnerable individuals and families. And it is an issue that we as a community must take seriously. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused significant economic problems, leaving many families struggling to make ends meet. On top of that, the cost of living is on the rise, and the energy crisis is further damaging the situation. These factors have made it increasingly difficult for households to pay their council tax bill, and it is imperative that the council take action to address this issue. In 2016, the council cut the level of support that the poorest members of our community could receive for their council tax bills. This decision has had a devastating impact on these families, who now must pay at least 20% of their total council tax bill, even if they are on the lowest incomes. This is unacceptable, and it is time for the council to rectify this situation. As we face a cost of living crisis with rising energy bills and inflation, we must remember that those who are already struggling financially will be hit the hardest. We cannot allow debt to push our most vulnerable citizens further into poverty. Therefore, it is important that residents in financial difficulty have access to the support they need to manage their debts. This will provide much needed relief to the poorest and most vulnerable members of our community. In conclusion, I would like the council to reconsider sustaining the support they earlier gave to residents with the lowest income in our community, and to take action to ensure that they are protected from the burden of debt. We must work together as a community to support those in need and to create a fair and just society for all. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denoran. Since no other members are in, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be very quick. I think this is an interesting motion and one that the Cabinet are happy to look at. The amendment tries to make sure that we're not prejudging anything, and it comes to Cabinet with an ability to either take decisions to do this or not to do this. I think, and I hope that that amendment will be accepted so that that can come to Cabinet in that way. I have a fear about this, and about this motion as it's written. I think my fear is it presumes that somehow people won't have to pay their council tax dues, and I think that's not the right message that needs to come out from the council. There are things that people have to pay, and council tax is one of them. When I've talked to people, the problem that people get in is they get into levels of unmanageable debt. Actually, having bailiffs being involved means for people that they're able to prioritise and organise their debt in the way that CAB and others would want them to do. So the problem is with people who just ignore debt, and it builds and builds and builds, and then it becomes unmanageable. I don't think the council can move away from having bailiffs just because some people just choose to ignore all the advice that they're given. The Cabinet are happy to look at this and see what we can do. I think it's been very important that we've looked at learning from places like Eastbourne, where they've worked to try to divide debts into measures for those who can pay and just won't, and those who have much more difficulty. And different strategies are needed to address each of those two different groups of people. And I'm pleased that we're doing that. I'm pleased that that emphasis has changed in the Council. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm happy to commend the amendment, which I hope means that we can look at this at Cabinet without it being prejudged with what we should do, but to come to us so that we can take expert advice about the way forward. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. I have Councillor Winnington indicating he wishes to speak. Councillor Winnington.
Not this time, Simon, don't worry. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. As Councillor Vernon Jackson said, this is an interesting motion. It's what I call an NHS treatment motion. The NHS has many issues, and one of the issues that often comes with funding is they often fund the treatments rather than prevention. And I think this motion and indeed the Stop the Knot campaign goes a bit too much on the treatments rather than the prevention side of things. I'm very happy to, as part of the Cabinet, to take this and look at this, but I think when it does come, we will be able to exponentially improve it and make a real difference. As Councillor Vernon-Jackson says, I don't think you can ever get to the point of not having bailiffs, but to get to the point where you don't even have to get to the point of having bailiffs, surely must be the thing that is the most important thing. So you don't get to the point where someone has not done anything about their debt, or not been able to do anything about their debt, or not known where to go about their debt, and then get it there. I know in the motion it mentions about review the council's signpost to the free debt advice, including phone online channels. It's pretty anemic though, isn't it? It's pretty anemic. It was very interesting, actually. I was at a meeting last week where we were talking about making every contact count, thinking about things in a far more holistic way, so that if you're interacting with any services and you mention you've got debt issues or something comes up, so that it can be whether you're going to your GP, whether you're going to a charity, whether you're with any other organisation that's providing you with a different service, could be going to your housing office, that you suddenly have that segue into knowing, hang on a minute, there's something going on and we can support you and help you. Think of it far more than just the way of saying, well, we're only here to support you with this, and therefore not thinking about things in general. So I'm certainly happy with the amendments about consider, and I do think it's one of these things actually whereby some of these organisations, like the Money Advice Trust, they do get very, very narrow, have a narrow focus, and they think that everyone is the same, and they have these blanket statements. Everyone is individual. Everyone does have situations whereby they have different reasons why they're in debt. They have different reasons why it's got to the bailiff point. As Councillor Corkery did say, and it says in the motion, for some people it's mental health issues. So if people are involved at all with mental health services, then that's the time to put that through. And there are pathways there already, but we need to make sure that happens on a general basis. But there all are, and it cannot be underestimated, because I have worked with people, myself as a support worker, where I've come in and they have got to the point of bailiffs because they have not done anything about it, because they just don't want to. And therefore, they get into a situation whereby they have to do something, because otherwise the bailiffs are going to take their things away. And indeed, they have to negotiate with the bailiffs at that point. And it's an unfortunate reality, but people are individuals and people do make choices that are sometimes very, very unwise. Not because of mental health issues, not because of other issues, just because they do not want to deal with the issues as they are. So I think that's certainly what I would be looking at us doing as a Cabinet when we get this back, with the amendments, I hope, which will be passed. And I'd hope, actually, Councillor Corkery, you would incorporate it in so we can get some consensus on this, no matter how much you dislike or like consensus. But it is an important issue to make sure that people don't get to the point of bailiffs. As has been mentioned, there are now less bailiffs being used by the council than before, which, to be honest, is showing that things are changing. Things are working better in terms of less people are getting to the point of needing, of getting to the bailiff side. But we need to understand everyone's circumstances, and we need to work together across all of our organisations, both within the council, outside the council, to try and support people when they're first having issues to get the support they need, whatever they might be, because a lot of holistic support can be put in place that is going to have an impact on people getting into debt. So thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor New.
Lord Mayor, well, I wasn't going to speak on this. However, I just thought, actually, to echo many of the points that Councillor Whittington made, that actually just listening to the debate that's just gone before us, I think it may sound to residents perhaps listening or viewing, dare I say, It sounds as if we've got quite a cold take on how we deal with people that fall into hardship. My experience, and I say that as somebody that's been in hardship and now seem to be one of the people that certainly people are directed to help them, that is not the case with the City Council. And I think that the officers in the housing departments, the collections departments are pretty fantastic actually, and they are a credit to us. During the pandemic, obviously, I think it's fair to say we should applaud the way that they helped people. People were in real crisis. It was kind of like nobody really knew how to deal with this. And I have to say, thanks to Councillor Steve Pitt and to the officers that were setting up policies on the go to help people, the holistic, kind and charitable approach that was taken by all of us working together, I think it's something we can all be proud of. And as Councillor Winnington pointed out, there are a million different reasons for the unique reasons that people fell into those hardships. And I think that the officers did a real credit to us, and they continue to do so. We've seen real positive change, I think. We could have just taken a cold view on lots of these things, you know, but I think that one of the proudest things that I've seen, certainly in the past 3-4 years in the City Council, is seeing a kindness descend on how we actually deal with people, how we approach them. And I appreciate, you know, it's hard. People are scared of the mailman even turning up because they just don't want to open their post. I think that's probably a very common cliche response that a lot of people in crisis have. And, you know, I think most of us can have some sympathy towards that. But there is a huge amount of help available via this City Council, the organisations we work with, the ones that we've set up and funded, which kind of sit slightly outside of the organisation, you know, especially around debt management, recovery, help through the parliamentary offices, even through people like the Hive who really go above and beyond. And I think as a city, certainly even on these issues, the Pompey spirit really shines through, and I think that's something that the 42 of us in this chamber can take some comfort in. And dare I say, I would like to think that part of the reason that this motion is here is because those residents are very well served by their current councillors in that ward, to the point that they felt passionately enough to bring that here. Well, we're passionate too, but I actually think that we must not undersell the services that we already have in-house and the approaches that we already take. And I think it takes a long time to get to bailiff point, to the point when I found out that it actually did happen. I was like, wow, you know, I've had some cases which I thought were pretty ropey and long and drawn out, so it must be quite a long time of not paying. But there is help available. Everything is resolvable, as my accountant used to say, and that's a true mantra to live by. And if people are in crisis and they're coming to their councillors, we're the people that can signpost them and hold their hand and say, we'll help you, but you also have to help us as well. So I just really wanted to add that context, that I think as a council, we do a huge amount, and it's something that we can be proud of. And I think that the way that we approach things now is far better than what we did 20 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor New. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My turn to say I wasn't going to speak on this item, and I genuinely wasn't, but as I was listening to the examples that Councillor Mellor mentioned earlier on, it took me back to 2009, when through literally no fault of my own, the backside fell out of the licensed trade during the cost of what was then the credit crunch. We do like to come out with these bizarre phrases to describe financial cycles, but anyway, well, there we are. I saw my primary responsibility at that point was to keep my staff in jobs, because they have families to feed and their own bills to pay, and that meant that some bills for the business went unpaid. It meant that I ultimately had to go personally bankrupt at that point, and I remember going over to Southampton the day before Christmas Eve for a meeting with the insolvency team over there, and I'll never forget what they said to me, because it was quite a release, to be honest, because the insolvency advisor said to me, we normally record these meetings, he said, but I'm not going to record today. He said, you'll only be here for about 15 minutes. He said, I just want to have a chat and make sure you're okay. And when I left, and excuse my language, Lord Mayor, but he said, I'm not recording the meeting today, but please go and enjoy your life and sod the banks, was what he said to me. And I've never forgotten it. I left there, got in my car, and went away feeling a huge sense of relief that a terrible burden had been removed, and swore never to get in that position again. Unfortunately, I haven't. But the one thing I do remember most significantly from that period of time was that the one thing you have to do to get into a position where you can get out of a horrible situation is listen and get good advice. Fortunately, I did both of those things. When people don't, and my fear with what's proposed as it stands here, without a proper and thorough review before it comes back to the Cabinet, is the unintended consequences. Because if there is not the possibility, at least, of ultimate sanction, my fear is that less people will engage, as Councillor New was saying, with the advice that is out there and the support that's out there. Less people will feel pushed to go and get that early support, and I genuinely fear that more people will end up in dire straits. So it could have an entirely counterproductive outcome. Now, just because people have come up with lists of things, policies, and they've started a campaign doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. But what we are offering to do here with a very minor amendment, which we do hope will be subsumed, is to carry out that review, look at everything that we do as a council, and make sure we are doing the best for the people of Portsmouth, but not that we are making a knee-jerk decision to change a process that could have really very dangerous and damaging unintended consequences. I remember a specific example when a resident contacted me because she knew the bailiffs had been at the door. She'd fled to her friend's house with her kids. She was terrified. So once I calmed her down on the phone, we got to the bottom of it. She'd been ignoring letters for months, and she knew that it was going to get to this situation, but she'd not wanted to confront it. Lord Mayor, it took 20 minutes on the phone with the housing team, the council tax team. We talked through it, we talked through her situation, I got the basic facts. A stop was immediately put on any further bailiff enforcement action. She went back home. I made an appointment for her at Advice Portsmouth the following day, one of the afternoon appointments you can have, but obviously you can drop in there as well. She went and saw them. They did a debt management plan. They got her out of trouble. She paid her council tax because she never thought that she shouldn't pay it. She just didn't know how to. And it should not be the responsibility of this council to enable people not to pay. It should be the responsibility of this council to help people to find a way to pay, and in doing so, restructure their debt to make sure that they can move on with their lives. That's what we are here for. That's what we need to make sure happens. I'm not remotely interested in doing something without fully understanding and appreciating how it might impact on people like the example I've just mentioned, and how indeed it would have impacted on me had I not got proper advice back in 2009.
Thank you. I now call upon proposer Councillor Corkery to sum up and ask whether he wishes the amendment to be subsumed.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for calling me to make a speech which may or may not be my last in this chamber. We shall see. In terms of the amendment, I'm happy to subsume that and accept the two additional words that the administration want to add into that. I'm more than happy to do that. I don't think it makes any difference either way. In terms of, I'll just respond firstly to some of the comments that have been made by members across the floor. In terms of the point around signposting, I mean, what the motion says is that we should review the signposting which is made available, which I think probably just seems like good practice to do across the board. It's not saying that signposting doesn't exist. It's not saying services aren't out there. We very much recognise they are. We're just saying that we should probably review it, make sure that all the information is up to date and that the information is good to go for when people need it. In terms of the Money Advice Trust campaign, I'm not entirely sure what the Money Advice Trust has done to the Lib Dems, but I think maybe to call their campaign morally wrong might have been going a little bit too far. Clearly, the Money Advice Trust is an independent charity set up to try and support people with money issues on low incomes. I don't accept that their campaign is morally wrong. I think they're trying to do a good thing, and we're trying to support that. In terms of, I just want to comment briefly on the behaviour and ethical standards in the debt collection sector, because the briefing note makes quite a spirited defence of the debt collection profession, and I think we've heard similar sentiments from across the floor. And let me just tell you, that is not the experience of many people that we have dealt with over the years who have bailiffs knocking at their door. I can give you one specific example. I was sat in someone's front room of their council flat, going through, actually doing a financial statement with someone, giving them some benefits advice. A knock on the door, she said, oh, that's them again, it's the bailiffs. I kind of sit down, I thought I'll listen into this conversation. The bailiffs, first question, when do you next get your benefits paid? She says, oh, I'm getting tax credits next week, I'll get £600. They say, can you afford to give us £500 of that? And that is the standard approach of bailiffs. They don't ask how much is affordable for you to give us. Let's sit down and do a financial statement. Let's work out how much money you need to put aside for your rent, how much money you need to put aside for your kids, how much money you need for your other essential payments. Most of them, if not all, as far as I'm aware, operate on a commission basis, where the more money they take off vulnerable people, the more money they get paid. So I think there is a serious review needed as a debt collection sector. And we saw that last month, just last month. It was being described as a national scandal when British Gas's use of these private debt collection agencies, where they were forcing their way into people's homes to disconnect their energy, has now led to British Gas, of all people, stepping back and saying we're not going to be using debt collection agencies for the time being because we need to have a proper review of the ethics around that. I think the leader's comments around bailiff use allows people to prioritise their debts. I mean, I'll just kind of, I guess, refer to what I've just said, but that is not the experience that people have of bailiffs. Bailiffs don't encourage people to, well, bailiffs do encourage people to prioritise their debts. They encourage them to prioritise the debts that are held by the bailiffs above all others, above rent, above food on the table for their kids. That's the problem we're dealing with here. So I think, I mean, like I say, we deal on a daily basis with people who've got real life experience of engagement with debt collection agencies. I think if the leader wants to come to one of our community meetings or residents associations and explain to people that debt collection agencies and bailiffs allow people to prioritise their debts, then I'll be very interested to see how that conversation progresses. Councillor Steve Pitt talks about listening and getting good advice. Again, we agree. We want people to listen and get good advice. We just don't think that bailiffs provide people with good advice. Bailiffs provide people with the advice to give me as much money as you possibly can. That is not good debt advice. So just to sum up, Lord Mayor, this motion is about ensuring vulnerable people on low incomes are not harassed by representatives of the local authority or people at least acting on its behalf. This is about recognising that sometimes the poorest have nothing more to give. This is about showing compassion and empathy towards the poor and the marginalised, and we hope that members will endorse this motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Corkery. The vote will now be taken. The amendment having been subsumed, it now becomes the substantive motion. Will those in favour of the substantive motion as it now stands please indicate? Those to the contrary, please indicate. Those abstaining, please indicate. 3, 5, 7, 9. I make that 12. And yourself, Lord? Abstaining. Right. The motion is carried. Members, we have been now in session for just over 2.5 hours. Would members welcome a break? Okay, I will put it. Members. I'll put that to a straw poll. I would remind members that we have one more motion and the questions to come. Those in favour of a 15-minute adjournment, please indicate. 3, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Those against, please indicate. There will be a 15-minute adjournment. Members, we now come to motion F on young carers, proposed by Councillor Horton and seconded by Councillor Vernon Jackson. Councillor Horton, do you propose this motion?
Yeah, propose this motion in my name.
Councillor Vernon Jackson, do you second this motion?
I second it and have no intention of speaking.
Half of the audience cheered, half of them laughed. The Lord Mayor stayed silent. I now call upon the proposer, Councillor Horton, to present and speak to her motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and I'm sure all the young carers in Portsmouth forgive that glib comment by Councillor Vernon Jackson. No, really, this is quite a straightforward motion, hopefully a nice one to finish on. I receive regular updates from the Carers Trust and realise that this meeting falls the day before the Young Carers Action Day tomorrow, and this year's theme is Make Time for Young Carers, so I thought I would do just that. And I just want to take this opportunity to focus on three things. One is to raise awareness of what over 1,000 young people in this city are experiencing. Highlight some of the support the council provides and to commit to exploring all avenues to extend that, and shine a light and commend the young carers and the young adult carers in this city. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that I am certain that this may relate to many members in this chamber. Today, I note Councillor Cole's declaration. I myself was a young carer, and now I'm an old carer. And this is a motion that very much points to powerful people, talking about powerful and strong people, not pitying people, but identifying the support that we can give to enable them to have flourishing lives. So I'm sure members are aware, but just to remind everyone, young carers are 18-year-olds who care for a family member with a long-term illness, a disability, a mental health condition, or substance misuse issue. This could be a parent or a sibling. The young person could be the primary carer or a secondary carer for that person. Obviously, and this is really crucial, the experiences and needs of each young carer are completely unique. The amount and type of care they provide can vary greatly, and this can affect their physical and mental health and well-being, as well as their educational achievement. Many young carers feel shame and embarrassment, may try and hide what their home life is like, and undoubtedly many feel different and sometimes isolated. So out of the plus 1,000 young carers we're aware of in Portsmouth, about 350 of them are routinely in contact with children's services. We have a small team who work directly with young people, and there's a particular focus on supporting schools in identifying and in turn supporting young people. And all are entitled to a young carers assessment, which will help determine what support and help can be made available. For example, as detailed in the motion, this might be opportunities to have a break, identifying other family members who could help and further support at school, as well as a list of other opportunities. Basically, to provide a layer of support for the young person. As well as highlighting young carers who are under 18, it's worth sparing a thought for young adult carers up to the age of 25 who lack some of the support that comes from being in a close-knit community like a school or college. One can only imagine the challenges of managing these responsibilities at a time of life when your peers are gaining more and more freedoms at college as they fly the nest, perhaps go away to university or get a job. Of course, young carers and young adult carers are an integral part of the health and care landscape. The new census, just a few months ago, shows that there is a distinct increase in the number of people providing substantial care and the deepening of the amount of care provided over time. Whilst the role that they are providing can be analysed in a very transactional way, and there is much debate about the financial contribution made by unpaid carers to the economy, the reality is that it is a complex, emotional relationship that is a huge responsibility for anyone, let alone a child, and that it's therefore very fitting that we should dedicate a few minutes of our lives today to think of this particular group. So hopefully this motion will gain support across the chamber as we reflect on the experiences and lives of a group of young people not very far away from here at the moment, who are caring for siblings and their parents and providing support and care for their loved ones at such a very young age. Please support the motion.
Do we have any amendments to the motion? No? Right, the motion is now open for debate. Councillor Stagg.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 9 years ago, when I was Lord Mayor, one of the charities I raised money for was for young carers. At that time, we had about 800 young carers in the city, aged from 5 upwards. And I spent a couple of evenings with the teenagers at the care centre, and it was just a joy to see young teenagers actually behaving like young teenagers and enjoying the things that I had taken for granted. I mean, teenagers were only just coming into existence. I'm that old, you know, but we did have a bit of freedom. I mean, I spent a lot of time playing on bombs at building sites and bomb craters, which my mother didn't know about, but at least I had the freedom. These kids didn't have that freedom. Their responsibility was to go home every day and look after somebody. And I had, when I was teaching, I had 2 boys in particular that I came across. I had no idea what their situation was. I was working in my office as Key Stage 3 coordinator, and I could hear what I thought was crying, somebody crying. And I went out and had a look, and I was on the ground floor, and there were stairs going up to the next floor. And I found this young lad, 14. He had Crohn's disease, later that came about, and he was crying his eyes out, and I asked him what was the matter. And we were into lesson time, and they weren't allowed to go home at lunchtime, and he had gone home because he was worried about his stepbrother, who was 7. Both his parents, his mother and his stepdad, were both on methadone, and they tended to store up the methadone for a blitz out on the weekend. And so he was worried that his stepbrother would be in a bit of a problem. So I investigated, and eventually we agreed. I arranged for him to be able to go home on certain days, lunchtime, for a quarter of an hour. And it made such a difference, because he used to come back and report to me, but he knew that somebody actually cared for him. And the other one was a young lad. He was also 14, and he was from a very deprived home background, lived in the middle of Charles Dickens Ward, and I noticed from looking at the registers that he was late to most mornings. So I caught him one day, and I said, you know, what's happening? You're just too late to get out of bed. And of course, it turns out he actually looked after his grandparents, who lived in a different flat, and used to go around every morning and make sure they got up and got washed, and etc. Now, I don't know why they didn't have carers to come in to look after him. I don't know what the situation was. I never got to the bottom of that. But he did that every day. And we had an arrangement, he and I, and with his tutor, that he would see to his grandparents, and as soon as he could come into school, he had to be in there by the start of lesson time, and he would have to report either to me or to his tutor that he's got in, because he was not sort of skiving off at all. And he did that every day, 5 days a week, well, 7 days a week, I suppose, 5 days a week as far as I was concerned. And to have somebody and some places to go where he could be a normal person made such a difference, because he didn't have a normal childhood. He didn't have the sort of childhood most of us had. He certainly didn't have the childhood that I had. So I think all these things that are in place in the city, a lot done by volunteers as well. And I know Ryan was running down at, I think it was in Portsea, one of the schemes on a Saturday morning for the younger carers. This is when I was Lord Mayor. And I went down there a couple of times and see these young kids running around, you know, just enjoying themselves with all that freedom. And the money that I've raised, I think it was just under £11,000, something like that, that went to allow a lot of the kids, particularly the older ones, to go maybe on a weekend adventure course, you know, something to do. And it was so important to them. So I think it's very important that we support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. No other member has indicated a wish to speak, so Councillor Horton.
Just to say thank you to Councillor Stagg for contributing. I'm assuming that the quietness for everyone else is that it's a positive endorsement of this, and I think I'm very proud to be able to say that we're supporting the Carers Trust in their day tomorrow.
Thank you. We now come to voting on the motion. Those in favour of the motion, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. I now move to the final agenda item, item 10, questions from members under Standing Order 17. Members, there are 3 questions under Standing Order 17, although the one to Councillor Atwell will fall since he is not here. These have been previously circulated. As you know, there was a total of 45 minutes allocated within standing orders to deal with questions. Can I remind everyone that the member asking the original question may ask up to 2 supplementary questions that must arise directly out of the original question. Any other member is limited to 1 supplementary question that must arise directly out of the original question or the replies. The first question, Councillor Shah.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Several residents have raised concern about not feeling adequately informed about the plans for the new football pitches and a pavilion at King George V playing fields. Can the Cabinet member inform me what measures were taken to inform residents and playing field users about the plans and what sort of consultation was carried out? Thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Shah. Consideration of the KG5 project goes back to 2017, so I picked it up having become Cabinet member in May 2018, and there have been a number of ways in which local clubs and therefore the players have been engaged and about the potential for a new football hub and helping determine where it is located in the city. I can recall a number of meetings where we had club secretaries and managers in with the Football Foundation and had extended discussions about this process. At the start of the feasibility, this was under the Football Foundation's strategic investment programme, which was called Parklife. Decision-making over a suitable site was informed by the playing pitch strategy and the local football facilities plan. Both the Parklife concept and the local football facilities plan engaged with local clubs to capture their usage demands and thoughts on using AGP, artificial grass pitches, to reduce overplay of grass pitch facilities or enable clubs to combine training needs for all teams rather than being distributed by smaller facilities citywide. The Parklife programme evolved into the Football Hubs programme that it is now, as proposals for the site developed throughout 2021 and 2022, and prior to submitting an application for funding to the Football Foundation, engagement with clubs was facilitated through and in tandem with Hampshire Football Association. City-based youth clubs, football clubs in particular, were approached to ascertain how their needs may best be accommodated at King George V playing field, which had been established as the most suitable site for such a facility. I'll just add there that there was a full site appraisal that happened during that intervening period, mainly during the second half of 2018 from memory, and KG5 was settled on as the most suitable location. Once outlined proposals were available to share, a public consultation survey was launched on the 15th of October and was open for until the 31st of October 2021. Obviously, this was during my absence from the Council. The online survey was promoted via the following marketing and communication channels: PCC email marketing distribution lists, including the Your City, Your Server, Your Say and staff lists, PCC e-bulletin subscribers, PCC social media platforms and a press release. It's also, I am informed that ward councillors had several briefings around this issue during that period. The survey attracted disappointingly smaller amount of responses, 208 in fact, but with 82% of those respondents either very supportive, 71%, or somewhat supportive, 11%. In addition, 2 community drop-in events were held at Cosham Library in September 2021 that included multiple schemes proposed for the Cosham area. It was used as an opportunity to directly speak to residents about the King George V playing fields proposal, and there were direct comments received from 66 attendees on that occasion. The original planning application was submitted in December 2021 and was an opportunity for local residents and playing field users to view and comment on the more detailed proposals. The scheme achieved conditional permission. In more recent months, an amended scheme for the King George V Football Hub was submitted to planning in December 2022 that reflected a slightly smaller pavilion footprint and revised external appearance. We issued a media release about submitting these updated plans, which is on the PCC website. The link is Portsmouth City Council is putting its best foot forward with updated plans for Football Hub. The story is later covered in the news in January once these were approved, and the link to a further release, Council plans to scale back new King George V playing fields Football Hub in Cosham are approved. Quite a long headline, Josh. We arranged for a further media release upon receiving the updated planning approval, which is also on the PCC website. Link is planning approval means work can kick off on King George V Football Hub, that reminded readers of scheme content, sporting partners involved, and that residents could expect to see contractors starting work on the site in February, which it did. The news refreshed their story over consent for the scheme. New football centre plans for Portsmouth King George V playing field set to go ahead. Whatever happened to Gotcha as a headline? And the latest media release also shared by Shaping Portsmouth, and there was a release there. Planning approval means work can kick off for King George V. Ahead of the City Council media releases going out, Adrian Rosier, who's the head of the Parks team, briefed local ward councillors along with a project update. Residents were encouraged to sign up for, actively encouraged to sign up for Portsmouth e-bulletins and choose all the updates they want to receive. There are lots of newsletters covering different areas, but this project has and will feature in the Sports e-bulletin, and there are currently 3,350 recipients, and they also receive the details of the Hillsey Lions e-bulletin around the Levelling Up Fund work. So we included a post on our Facebook page to get people to sign up to our Hillsey Lions e-bulletin to be kept updated on this redevelopment. The post mentioned the Hillsey Lions project, which received Levelling Up funding, as I've just said, and including £1 million towards King George V Football Hub. This project will also provide better connected cycling and walking routes to the King George V Football Hub. The Council website page on sports and leisure will continue to be updated as work proceeds, and we plan to place more information on the site hoardings once the works mobilisation is complete for site users to view. The March issue of Flagship magazine, which is actually due out this week, and will go to every resident in the city, and also includes the update that the work is starting at King George V Football Hub.
I think you're going for the Councillor Bentley Prize for the longest answer. Councillor Shah, do you have a supplementary question? You're fine.
Thank you.
Okay. In which case we come to the question. Has anybody else got a question arising out of that? Councillor Atkins.
Very quickly, I remember attending the drop-in sessions with Councillor Mason at the Cosham Library. You mentioned 66 responses. Were those responses generally positive? What kind of feedback did you get, and did that influence the further development of the scheme?
I don't have an exact percentage split on the responses, but the feedback I had from officers was that the response percentage in terms of being in favour or having reservations about it was very similar to the previous round of consultation that had taken place. I can, of course, get you the exact answers in writing, should you wish.
No one else is indicating, so we will move to question 2, which is in the name of Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, to the Cabinet Member. Again, can he confirm whether or not the Much Love fireworks display will return to the KG5 fireworks, KG5 playing fields after the development work on the football site is finished, preferably next year?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Atkins, thank you for your question. I understand that a response was given by my predecessor as Cabinet Member to a similar question in March 2022. This response did not, however, include background information supplied by officers that would have helped to give more context. Having said this, the previous Cabinet Member was also not able to answer fully at the time, as the full plans for the site were not available until the Cabinet meeting on the 21st of June 2022. Following the publication of the plans, I am now able to offer further detail regarding the King George V fireworks and other events that take place on the King George V site. The Football Hub project will provide more varied pitches going forward for the community to use, so that the venue can accommodate the high demand for youth training and age classes matches as well as adult matches. The AGPs offer the flexibility to hold a number of games at any one time, and the artificial surface means that games are not cancelled during periods of sustained poor weather. The demand for this type of facility is demonstrated in the playing pitch strategy and local football facilities plan, and is focused on meeting the growing demand, upgrading facilities so that players have a better playing experience, both pitch and changing facilities, and so that it increases the opportunity for participation and healthier lifestyles. The full plans demonstrate the footprint of the AGPs and the other facilities. These cover a significant part of the land. Whilst the open space for the fireworks firing zone and the safety zone remain, it is the feeling of the events team that there will not now be adequate space to enable the large numbers of attendees to safely watch and egress the event, particularly given the growth in numbers since COVID and recent rather scary experiences, particularly at last year's event, where despite all best practice being employed and proper advice given, families were choosing to cross the very busy main road and not use the designated crossing points. The police raised concerns with us about that after the event. As members will be aware, the fireworks display is just one of a number of events that takes place at the site, and discussions will occur with the events team or any other event organisers who do wish to use this site to consider the feasibility and layout of activities going forward. We absolutely recognise the relationship between the annual city firework display and its historic delivery in the north of the city, and we will seek to make sure that this event remains in the north of the city going forward. Now, what I've said to officers, and this is still in the planning stage, and I know it might be unusual to talk to you about it, but I do think it's important that we're transparent on this. Because of the increasing footfall at Cosham, it has made it very difficult to accommodate everyone from the south of the city who floods up to the north of the city for that event. So I've asked for a feasibility to take place to look at holding 2 simultaneous fireworks events on the appropriate date, one in the south of the city and one in the north of the city. Once we've looked at that feasibility, and it's going on at the moment, we will then review the likely numbers that we feel would attend an event in the north of the city and see whether whether that could safely be accommodated at KG5. If it can't be, we pledge to find an alternative location in the north of the city in discussion with ward councillors to make sure that the event remains in the north, and we will continue to pursue a simultaneous event in the south of the city. In terms of sustainability, lots of people jumping in their cars and flooding north, the huge amount of footfall on the site, the potential damage that it causes to the grass up there and its playability then as sports pitches afterwards at a very difficult time of year. Remember, we had to reschedule the event last year because it was so wet it wasn't safe to put the infrastructure on the site, that we feel that it's worth exploring whether there are better alternatives. One, to be able to guarantee that the event can go ahead on the planned date, because obviously rescheduling incurs further cost, but also to make sure that we can do that in a way that's accessible and safe for local residents. Alongside that, I feel a real necessity now for people to be able to stay local in the south of the city and enjoy a fireworks display without adding all that extra pressure at a key time of day in Cosham. We are also, as part of that process, going out to look for sponsors that might help to make that deliverable within the funding envelope that's currently available to the Council.
Councillor Atkins, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, and I had some I was going to ask, which are now somewhat changed, I will admit, because this is very disappointing news. Councillor Mason and I sought repeated assurances, both from officers and your predecessors, that the major events, including and specifically the fireworks display, would not be affected by this. This is not something that was communicated to residents in consultations, that this event, which is much loved, would be affected and ultimately potentially moved as a result of this. My supplementaries are somewhat changed. Can you confirm, therefore, that what you were saying is that there is now a high likelihood that the fireworks display will not return to Corsham in the future?
No, I think I was quite clear, Councillor Atkins, through you, Lord Mayor, that if I did nothing, that would be the case. I'm not doing nothing. I'm looking at a feasibility that splits the event to happen simultaneously in 2 locations on the same evening. So there is, because if we held them on different nights, people would just go to both. That would cause chaos. So it needs to be simultaneous. We're doing the feasibility around that at the moment, and then we will come back and talk to you. What I can't stand here today and do is promise to do something that has not been scoped yet. I do understand that you were not given the full answer that was offered by officers at that time. I can't change that, Matthew. We are where we are. I'm being straight with you. I'm telling you that in my view, with the ground conditions up there, if they were to be repeated again with that level of footfall, whether or not we did the artificial grass pitches, there are serious questions to be asked about the suitability of that location, given the increased footfall and demand that is placed on it through having it as the single point for the entire city. So we will continue to work that through, and as soon as we've got an answer, and hopefully it will be fairly soon, because I was instructed it a few weeks ago once I realised that this was potentially an issue, that we will report back to you. So, and it will be done in full consultation with you, so that you can communicate effectively with your residents.
Do you have a second supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your straightforwardness, Councillor Pitt, because I will admit that I am feeling, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, because of the rules of debate, somewhat misled by your predecessor on this issue, given that Corsham is often identified as a place with extremely good transport links, given the proximity of the bus station, the parking at Lakeside, and the train station. My final question on this point then is will you meet with Councillor Mason and I and Councillor Shaw as soon as possible, and with officers, to discuss ways that we can potentially maintain this loved event at Corsham at that site, and also so that we can get the full story from officers in the full detail that we would like subsequent to this meeting? Thank you.
Very happy to have the meeting, Councillor Atkins. I would just say, please be patient while I actually get the officers to do the feasibility work, because whilst I understand the emotional feeling at the moment that you have, having had this answer from me today, having a bunch of us sat around a table bemoaning a situation without a clear plan on how we might move forward and proposals is not something that will actually be terribly productive, I suggest. If, however, you insist that that meeting happens, I will accommodate it, but I like to have useful discussions, and I would urge you to be a little bit patient about how we do that. Don't expect you not to communicate back to your residents that you've got concerns. That's absolutely fine. I just like when we're going to sit down and actually have a discussion for it to be productive. The ball's in your court. You choose. Drop me an email. Let me know either way. I think it's really important that whatever solution we work through here is the right one, but I would remind you that this is the single largest investment by the Football Foundation in one site anywhere in the country. This was an enormously important programme and a huge amount of demand from community sports. So whilst it is disappointing that we are in a position where a popular annual event may need to relocate somewhere else nearby, that has to be balanced, obviously, against the huge amount of investment and benefit that money will bring to the city, both through levelling up funding, through the Football Foundation, and through the match funding that the City Council proposed to put in there. I can remember standing in this position, having 1,001 questions asked of me about why we weren't rebuilding the existing changing rooms in Corsham, and I stood my ground very firmly on that occasion. I seem to remember I had to say asked and answered about 15 times in the space of 20 minutes, but I was right. I made the right decision, and that was to hold back that money that we had for refurbishment of that pavilion and put it into this project, and that's why it is going to be the single largest investment by the Foundation in any one site anywhere in the country.
Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Given the distress fireworks can cause to animals such as cats and dogs and the lack of space mentioned in this new build, I just wondered if the Cabinet member can explore alternative displays such as the light show seen at Stalton Country Park, which may be able to facilitate that lack of space mentioned before.
Thank you, Daniel. Councillor Williams, very happy to explore that. There are also low noise alternatives available for traditional fireworks now, which I've been urging the council to explore, and we did actually use when we did last night at the bandstand last year, and it does make an enormous difference. I've got a dog that's terrified by fireworks, who throws himself on me, shakes and refuses to move until it's died down, so I know exactly what it's like to go through that, and anything that we can do to mitigate the impact on animals, I would welcome. So yes, happy to do that. I genuinely think we can come up with an outcome here that benefits the whole city, doesn't upset anybody, and delivers two top quality events for both the north and south of Portsmouth.
Councillor Lee Mason.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I would go a bit further. I feel very much like my residents do that we have been lied to by officers and members. Given that Cosham has got excellent transport links, rail, bus and road, what guarantee do we have that, like in question 3 that has been dropped now, we won't have the two sites and then Cosham is conveniently dropped in the future, a bit like the Jubilee Big Lunch is now only happening in the south of the city, and we're given grounds of funding. I share my residents and other councillors' concerns about this. So what guarantees do we have in the future that we won't be shafted again on this?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I can't guarantee anything to anybody because I may not, but just, you know, it just might happen. Might not be the last person to sit in this seat. So I can't guarantee what future incumbents of the role may or may not do. What I can say is that I could have stood here today and given you a load of bull and baloney and tried to obfuscate and make out that this was all something different than it is. You were given a one-word reply at that council meeting. That shouldn't have happened. I've given you a full detailed explanation today. I've offered to meet with you. I'm very happy to do that. I think anyone in this council knows that if you come to me and you ask for an honest conversation, you get one. That's all I can offer you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that safety should always be the paramount issue at any public firework display?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, of course. It has to be the paramount concern, and it is the amount of available space, given the increase in numbers, that is the overriding concern up there. But also linked to that was the ground conditions that we saw last year, where we had to cancel and rearrange for the following week, because if we'd gone ahead on the planned night, I'm pretty sure that there would have been injuries. People would have been hurt. It wasn't safe to drive the vehicles on there, to put up the lighting, which is essential to ensure safe access and egress, nor was it safe for the food providers to drive onto the site, nor the fireworks company to actually mount their display. So safety has to come first. What I'm trying to come up with is a solution that means that the safety issues can be permanently mitigated because a different location enables a better and more reliable outcome.
Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It sounds very disappointing, the answer that Councillor Pitt has given, because the cynic in me suggests that this is one step removed to take it away from Cosham. However, Councillor Pitt did make the comment in there that they were going to be looking at alternative venues in the north of the city. I can think of perhaps two, and I'm not necessarily going to draw Councillor Pitt on that now, but could I ask that if they are looking at alternative sites, they involve those ward councillors as well, because I suspect one is probably Drayton and Farlington, and I suspect one is possibly Hilsey. But can he give an undertaking that those ward councillors will be kept in the loop so that we know exactly what is going on in our wards rather than being kept out of it?
Through you, Lord Mayor, you've got a categoric assurance from me, Simon, that as soon as we have a proposal that we think works, we will discuss that both with the Cosham ward councillors and the ward councillors in the ward where the proposed site is. Yes.
Right, members, that concludes that question. The question from Councillor Shah to Councillor Atwell will receive a written answer from Councillor Atwell. Members, that concludes today's council meeting, although I would like to make a couple of final comments. As you know, this is the last full council meeting before local elections. So may I thank colleagues for their support during the year and the courtesy they have shown to me as in the chair. And I would also like to thank those members who are not seeking re-election. I'd like to thank them for their services to the council over many, many years. These are Councillor Linda Symes, who has served on the council since 2006. Councillor Lynn Stagg, who has served on the council since 2007. Councillor Robert New, who has served on the council since 2011. Councillor Gemma New, who has served on the council since 2015. And Councillor Terry Norton, who has served on the council since 2019. I give them my best wishes, and I am sure every member of the council would give them their best wishes for the future. So thank you very much for your services to this council. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This is your last council meeting, unless we have to have an emergency one, in your year of office. So I think on behalf of all of us, can I thank you, Lord Mayor, for your year and how you've kept us in order and run the meetings. And hopefully in your next year in office as Lord Mayor, as it seems traditional to do more than one nowadays, that you will continue in that. So thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, I think on behalf of all of us.
Thank you for those kind words, Councillor Vernon Jackson. I now close this meeting at 5:27, and when the live stream has stopped, I would like to make two comments. Two members. So is live stream stopped? Okay.